Medfield TV, community shows.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, February 5th, 2019. As always, this meeting is being video recorded. We'll begin the meeting, as always, with a moment of appreciation for our troops serving in the Middle East and around the world. Thank you. Announcement from Norfolk County Registry of Deeds, the hardest working register of deeds in America. William O'Donnell will be holding office hours in Town Hall on Thursday, February 14th, 2019, 10 a.m. to 12 noon in the Chenery Meeting Room, second floor, right here. Our first appointment, 7:05 p.m., is a public hearing with a petition from Eversource and Verizon to install one new utility pole at 80 North Meadows Road to provide service to the new apartment building there. Eversource Representative Chris Cosby here. Oh, there we are. I recuse myself because of the Verizon issue, so I will leave you in the good hands of Mr. Murby and Mr. Peterson.
Christine Cosby, Eversource Energy, and we are requesting a grant of location for a new pole on West Street, and the purpose of the new pole would be to provide the new overhead to underground service to the new building under construction at 80 North Meadows Street.
So it's a public hearing, so you should declare it open.
So I'll declare this public hearing open. You don't have to vote on that, right? I just declare it. Thank you. New frontiers for me.
And they ask if anybody's here to speak for or against it.
Have you finished?
Yes.
You've said everything you want to say. Okay. Does anybody here have any comments for or against the request from Verizon for the location of the new pole? Hearing no comments. Selectman Peterson, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I just wonder if we should stop building new buildings, because every time we build a new building, it seems like we need a new
I
pole.
was thinking it looked almost like it replaced two poles here. I'm not sure what the two black dots on the map are, but
She should be able to tell you that.
Yeah, actually, the black dots are existing poles.
so they're still there. You're just
Yes.
putting yet another pole in.
Yes.
Okay. And none of them are double poles, I trust.
No.
Okay.
Have you talked to the police about the location?
As far as the police detail,
Or no, more from terms of traffic on 27?
that's something that we will do. I mean, whatever recommendations or conditions the DPW would like to add.
Hearing no more comments, I close the hearing. And let's see, which one of us needs to make a motion? You make the motion to approve it?
I would move that we allow the petition to install the new utility pole at 80 North Meadows Road, as indicated.
I second. All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, that was such an expeditious public hearing. We are a couple of minutes ahead of our next appointment, so we can hopefully clear out some of our action items. Town Planner Sarah Raposa requests us to vote to authorize me to approve and sign the MAP Technical Assistance Scope of Work for a creative placemaking project at the former Medfield State Hospital site. Any details on the creative placemaking?
This is a grant that Sarah applied for, a technical assistance grant from MAPC for $25,000, and they will work with Sarah and a group of people over the next year to do an event at the state hospital to focus on the cultural aspect of the campus.
What would that event actually be?
They haven't decided. There was some discussion of doing some music and porch rocking. I may have ruined the porch part of it when I told them they couldn't use the porches. So they're working off that, but it'll be some sort of music artistic event.
Trying to picture them if there are porches. I guess there must be porches.
There's some porches on the front of some of the buildings, but they're not. Yeah, you could use it once.
You probably would rock if you spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
Questions, Pete?
No, it struck me as a good, interesting thing to do.
I actually do. I have, I guess, question. It's too bad Gene Minio or somebody's not here. I'm not against the idea, but I do have two concerns. The first one, if this is promotional for the Arts and Culture Center, the thing that concerns me is we haven't gotten past some of the infrastructure issues around. It seems to me that there's some preparatory stuff that will enable the project that we haven't sorted out yet. So we're kind of marketing a center that we actually don't yet have on the railroad tracks. We certainly have the authorization to do the lease, but we haven't gone through some of the technical things. And so, having talked about what this is all about, that's one thing, but my concern about it is that we heighten expectations for what's going to be there before we actually have a clue about how we're going to make that come about. So it may not, that has more to do with, I think, the strategy of the town and the Culture and Arts Center around when do you want to start drawing people's attention to something like this when we actually don't know how we're going to do it in terms of supporting it with infrastructure. So I will raise that concern. I'll vote for it. I'm okay with it, but I will raise that concern.
I'll bring that up to Sarah and Jean.
I guess that might be a timing question as much as anything.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, it's
I know there's a
timing,
proposed
yeah.
work plan, but I wonder how flexible the work plan is if we go ahead with this, they can kind of, once we have some more meat on the bones, do more of it. I don't know. I couldn't tell if there was a kind of sunset date on when they had.
I didn't see a sunset date. I think they had an 8 to 9 month work plan. I think they were looking to do something either later this fall or early next spring.
Oh, later this fall.
Yeah.
Later in 2019.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, I think it's at least a year. It's 9 months to a year out. I think it's 8 to 9 months of planning and then scheduling the event. So I think it's
Okay,
about a year.
So if you can relay that, this has all got to do with wanting this to work and being concerned that we put the cart before the horse and we wind up getting in trouble.
No. Do we have a motion on
So
this?
I move that we vote to authorize Chairman Marcucci to approve and sign the MAPC Technical Assistance Scope of Work for a creative placemaking project, Sans Porch Rocking at former Medfield State Hospital site.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right, we have a recommendation from Selectman Murby to appoint Sean Kay to the Townwide Master Planning Committee. This came in last week just after our agenda deadline. Any questions, comments, concerns about Mr. Kay from anyone?
Nope.
We have a motion?
I move that we appoint Sean Kay as a member of the Townwide Master Planning Committee.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We also have a request to authorize me or my designee, suggesting that perhaps the documents aren't here to be signed tonight.
They're not here to be signed until MSBA has to approve you voting to have you or your designee sign them before we can actually then sign them.
Okay. The process will be then. Michael, are you here on this item at all, or?
If you have any questions, I can.
This is just to sign just any documents or other documents?
It's to sign any of the MSBA documents, like the feasibility study we just signed. They did not accept Peterson's pro tem chairmanship that evening. And the way it's set up now, we would.
I thought it was like a coup in Medfield, but I make sure.
The way it's set up now, you would need all 3 selectmen signatures and all the signatures of the Dale Street Feasibility Building Committee. So we're trying to limit the number of people that are required to sign.
And then, assuming that 7 weeks from now, there's another chairman of the Board of Selectmen, we'll have to have another vote to authorize that chairman to sign it
Correct.
as well. Okay.
Within 20 days of that chairmanship changing.
Okay.
If so long as we never let Pete do it, right?
Apparently.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we vote to authorize Chairman Marcucci or his designee to sign documents for the MSBA Dale Street School project.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
All right, it is now 7:15, so we can move to our next scheduled appointment with Mr. Jeff Petter, owner of Zealous Beer Company, and Sun Multisports Events Race Director Mark Walter, to discuss a proposed race event to be held on June 30th, 2019. You want to step up and introduce yourself, sir?
Good evening. My name is Mark Walter, and my partner in this proposal is Jeff Petter. I know he's on his way, but he's not here at present. So our interest in being here tonight is we've proposed a new running event that would be called the Zelus Light Run. Zelus is a is a craft beer, and they have petitioned to have a tap room established at 1 Green Street. So sort of the concept behind this is and here's Jeff now. The concept here is the event would essentially start and finish at that tap room at 1 Green Street. To give you a little bit of background, I am a full-time event operator. Sun Multisport Events is my company. I am a Westwood resident. I put on a series of running events and triathlons and other types of events that I own, as well as that I'm contracted to work on. So just so you're aware, I have over 10 years of experience in this kind of thing. So the event that we have proposed is for Sunday, June 30th. The idea that there would be 2 running distances, a 6-miler and a 3-miler. We're estimating the first year might be 500 participants. The parking plan is to utilize the Montrose School. That has already been approved with overflow at the Hinckley Memorial Park. The organizers, as I've mentioned, is myself along with Jeff. And I'm just kind of going through this overview page that I think everyone has. The insurance for the event would be provided through sanctioning with USA Track and Field. If you'd like, I can run through the timeline, which is on page 2 of here. But essentially, the people would start gathering around 8 a.m. The race would start at 10, and festivities would conclude at about 12:30 p.m. Page 3 of the attachment includes an overview of both the 6.2 and the 3.3 mile race. So you do see that there's some overlap there. We tried to do that as best we can. I've also included on this document where I was thinking we should have police details. So I haven't yet to meet with the police on this. I believe it's been circulated, but I would certainly want to sit down with the police to get their input on what I've proposed here and what changes, if any, they would want. Any specific questions about the course?
I guess you said you haven't sat down with the chief of police yet.
No.
Okay, so I guess that would be my first question is, has anybody in town okayed the course yet?
Well, I guess that's kind of what I thought was the process here. I don't know if it was
Usually it gets okayed by the police chief before it comes to us, is my
Okay.
usual sense, but...
Okay, so I don't know if it was, Evelyn, was it circulated? I don't know if that was, I think,
To the police?
no, it was not, okay.
I think that's normally something you would talk to. It's not just a matter of circulating to them. You'd have to get in touch with the police.
Sure, no, right, I realize that, but usually, anyway, each town is a little different. I would most definitely be sitting down with the police.
Okay.
And then the only other thing that struck me was the service of beer in the morning on Sunday. We've already turned down one race event that wanted to serve beer in the morning on Sunday.
Saturday.
Well, Saturday, was it?
That was Saturday.
Okay.
I think one was a Sunday, but... Are they open? Is this tap room open?
I think the race we turned down was Saturday. The cyclocross was not, we didn't approve of beer and alcohol
Right.
until afternoon. And they
Right,
weren't
yeah.
serving, they were doing tailgating. So it was, so we've kind of adopted a policy. We have a town that if it doesn't have the highest percentage of 18-year-olds and younger is right up there in the top 10. And the issue is teaching kids in town that you get up on, whether it's a Saturday or Sunday morning, and go run a few miles and then stop for a beer and then finish the few miles and bang down a beer at 10:30 in the morning just is not a message that we want to send. So that piece of it is problematic.
Okay.
Is this tap room open now?
No.
This is like a mobile tap, or this is, the tap room you're talking about on Green Street is,
No, it's, no, we're just get a microphone, just so the folks at home can hear you. And just introduce yourself before you start.
Yeah, my name is Jeffrey Petter. I'm the majority owner of Zenith Beer Company.
The tap room is not open, although it has been signed off by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And we also have signed a lease. And our intention is to try and open the end of March or the beginning of April. We have also, I think just about, Sarah's not here,
No.
but we also likely to get permission to have a food truck there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. So no, it's not technically open.
But it will be at the time of the proposed rate.
Indeed, yes.
And for the record, speaking at least for myself on the Board of Selectmen, I like beer, and I'm delighted that we have a craft, so this is in no way a reflection on the business you're opening up. It's just doing it at 10:30 in the morning is something that we've kind of said is the wrong message to send to our kids.
What about at noon?
Noon was the kind of cut. In other words, after noon time, then...
All bets are off.
We'd secured permission from the land, because we obviously don't own the property. We'd secured permission for, we'd asked we're kind of trying to do two things at once here, because generally running races, we're both athletes ourselves. Running races are generally done earlier in the morning, but obviously drinking is generally done later.
Yeah.
So we were trying to finish around midday so that, it's a more realistic time that people can drink. So if we moved it so it finished at around midday, would that be suitable?
Mr.
Sorrell?
I don't have the benefit of the paperwork you have, so I don't know what. So, to take this back a minute, what kind of a license do you have for alcohol? Or do you have a farmer's?
We currently have a federal brewery permit.
Yeah, well, state
and a
what?
state ABCC farmer brewer license.
Farmer's brewery.
Which allows us to, from the tap room, we'll be able to pour pints and sell off premise from the tap room. So if there's a particular complaint that we can't serve,
that's not entirely true. You've got a farmer's brewing license. And where's your brew facility right now? Or where's it going to be? Is it going to be at Green Street?
I will backtrack a bit for a second. You're correct. Yes, we have a farmer brewer license which allows us, statewide to sell off premise and
at
do
agricultural events.
Not if we get a one-day license from the town.
Okay, all right. So you need a one-day license from the town, or if you were going to serve on the premises to sell, you would also need a regular license from the town.
We need a pouring permit,
Right.
permission from the Board of Selectmen.
That's a license, that's a local license.
Which we have not come in front of you guys yet, because we don't have transport license.
If I can use you both for a second. So we had a request for the one-day license. It did not come in time to get on the agenda for tonight. So I would suggest on some of these regulatory details that you may have to work out with Mark or with Sarah, if you could do that, then we can just talk about this conceptually, because I think we're all going to want the police chief to review before we're going to vote on anything. And so I think if we can keep this at the level of kind of a conceptual discussion about this, any concerns that we have, we'll probably have to come back.
Okay.
So talk to the police chief once he's sorted out all the regulatory stuff, and once we get the license on
So the question would be how.
I mean, we're all enjoying the education of the scope of.
Well, there was all the way background to understand how would, if you were permitted, how would you serve on the day of the race?
I
Going to serve out in the parking lot, or people would go into or there'd be another location? How would you do that?
Yes, I didn't want to talk at cross purposes. For when we open our tap room, we will need permission from the Board of Selectmen to be able to pour pints, and we haven't got our license yet transferred there to be able to request that yet. For this one-day license, the idea would be that we would serve it in the parking lot, and as I wrote, it would basically, we generally have a 10 by 10 foot tent. We would then rope that off in a sort of 20 by 20, and anyone accessing that area would have to obviously be over 21. We'd give them wristbands, etc. We we do a lot of events around, we've been based in Medfield basically since the beginning, but we've never really done any events here. But I can list the towns out where we have done events. We do them, we do them in Dover, Ashland. It's something that we kind of do because our beer is a active lifestyle beer. We actually have a patent pending for electrolytes in beer, and believe it or not, and so yes, we promote. We're both athletes. He's not associated with Zila, so we have done a lot of his events because he does about 10 events a year, and we do them all over the state. So that's kind of the concept of the brand.
Smoothies or anything.
No.
Pete, additional questions?
So I guess first of all, I'd say welcome to Medfield. Thanks for opening up your business here.
Thank you.
I think that it would work a lot better if you did run the race in the afternoon. That was the first thing that struck me, that if you could just start it later, that would be great.
Okay.
And
Or alternatively, have it to where you don't actually start serving beer till noontime.
Yes.
So if you wanted to have a morning race, you might start a little later than what you'd planned, but just basically have the tap room part of it open up later.
I guess there's kind of two parts to the request that we're making here. A is, and I know you guys can't answer it necessarily, A is that we wanted, is us having a race in Medfield generally in this route okay, right? Is that something that is acceptable to the selectmen? And then second of all, the beer associated with it, even being served afterwards. I was actually proposing, which is probably a little bit more controversial, that we would have tasting tables during the route. I don't know if you ever know that Sam Adams during the marathon once had tasting tables for its beer on the marathon route. Well, I know it had it at some race. I don't know if it was necessarily on the marathon. So it's not totally unheard of. They had a beer called the 26.2, which is a gose, which is very high in salt levels. Electrolytes are basically salts. But we were hoping to have a couple of tables en route where it could be, people could tie 2-ounce samples.
And that would be open both to the runners and the audience.
Spectators, yes.
So at the very least, I would think that falls on the noon side cutoff, so that might affect when you have the race.
Okay.
Although these are a little small, unless...
The ABCC is very physical location oriented. I frankly don't know how you have tasting tables off licensed premises, if that's permissible. That's something you'd have to run by the ABCC.
We have done it on multiple occasions, yes. As long as the landlord or the landowner gives permission, and then as long as the town then gives permission to serve at that location, we have done it, yes.
Those would be free, those tasting tables, it would be free beer, I assume. You're not selling the beer, you're just...
We would not sell it there, no.
You can't. I mean, there's just... Farmers breweries brew a lot. The brewer series of license, farmers series, I should say the farmers series of licenses, brewery, distillery, winery, are a unique subset of licensing. They have their own rules and requirements.
Here's the part I'm not sure about. When we go into the holiday season, we sometimes get requests from some of our local merchants for a one-day license because they want to serve holiday cheer, and I think we said they can do that as long as they're not selling it. They don't need a license. They can just serve, holiday wine or whatever.
Yeah, that's.
So how is that different from what they would do if they are just offering free samples?
Because as a function of their license, there's certain things they can do. They could have a tasting room, a tap room on premises. Yep. They can go to an agricultural function and provide tasting. But to have kind of a general roaming where they can set up tables anywhere and have tasting, apart from the security aspect, which I would submit if it's okay, you're going to need to involve the police in. But I question whether the ABCC would go along with that.
So the issue is because they're brewers, they're more restricted in what they could do.
The kind of brewer they are, they're a farm brewer.
But what I'm getting at is, so over here, one of the clothing stores we have right here on North Street.
Right.
If they want to serve, Harvey's Bristol cream for the
Well, it's
holidays.
a function of being licensed, what you can and can't do. Being licensed as a brewer,
Okay, so it
a
is.
farmer brewer, there's certain things you can do that you can't otherwise do,
Okay.
and there's certain things you can't do.
So here's what I'm going to suggest.
I-
I'm going to make a suggestion. First question for us is, Gus or Pete, do you have a conceptual problem with this race?
Not a conceptual, although I have a technical question. You had said there's, as you propose it here, you said you needed 5 police details, but you have 7 intersections.
Correct.
And I wasn't sure how 5 details cover 7 intersections.
Because the first 2 would be at the very early part of the race.
Okay,
And
and
would
they
literally be
rotate
neat,
them.
because the way the race starts, they start at 1 Green Street and they cross over not North Street, the main road there, and then
Yeah.
they're towards Adam. So that, we need a policeman there to just stop traffic, and they're gone, they're through it in a minute. So that police
Okay.
officer would then be
I got it.
redeployed.
Okay.
Similarly, the second police
I get it.
detail position.
Okay.
And then the other thing, just that I would, if the plan does include some temporary road closures. So again, we would meet with the police, and I guess my question to the board is, if the police okay that, will you okay that? If not, then maybe we should have that discussion, because then that would affect changing the route.
How many runners do you expect to have?
I mean, we're shooting for 500, but it could end up being 300. It could be 700. These things can be sometimes very difficult to project.
And so the cluster will be, at the early stages, will be running together.
Yes,
Closures could be pretty minimal.
correct. And the
Then
timing
towards
of
the
that
end of
is,
the race, they'll be a little longer, so.
that's right. And the document you have there does include the time ranges to allow for that. So
Oh, okay.
we are looking also, the longest closure would be that segment of Green Street right in front, where we'd have the finish line and where, people would be finishing and starting. So that would be the longest, and I think we have that for like 10 to 12:30, or 2.5-hour window. But that only affects a few homes. Part of I didn't put in there, part of the communication strategy here would be to send a mailer to those homes along the route. So that would take place as well, to give everyone a heads up what's coming.
Yeah, as I read, like, you're on North Meadows Road, but that sounds like, it's a nice wide road. It looks like you're using just the shoulder, which is going to be plenty wide, so that's one of the biggest stretches where it seemed like it wouldn't be a problem. I live on Harding Street, and it seems like the only absolute road closure that was on the course was Harding Street, and it was for something like half an hour.
Yeah.
And we may find out that my nonchalance about a half-hour closure on my own street is not acceptable to my neighbors, but, at first blush, I wouldn't think, Pete, you're going to be affected by this as well, and I would think, in the interest of at least letting this try out, that you probably would kind of be okay letting that go. And I think in most other places, it was just one lane.
I was thinking you'd probably be hard pressed to pick a date in Medfield where there will be fewer people on Sunday, June 30th. And so I imagine this will be probably not great for your promotional activities.
Oh, because it's July 4th?
Well, yeah, but after school gets out, things get a little quieter around
Yeah,
here.
right.
Even quieter than normal. So from a road closure standpoint, I don't think we're going to have a big backup of cars at that point. So that from that standpoint, it's probably pretty good.
One of the reasons for that is the Montrose School has given us the nod to using their parking lot, and we wanted to use that after they closed too.
Yeah, no, it's a fine date. I mean, I think there'll be plenty of people around. It's a quiet driving time. All right, we have some questions from the audience. Bill Massaro is up first, so we'll start with Billy. Jeff, you'll have to pass the microphone over to this.
I think I read the route correctly, but I just wanted to confirm that there's no intention to use any of the hospital property.
No, there is, the route does include going through there, so that would be another approval that we would.
All right, so you're going to need to talk to the Building and Grounds Committee and everything else. I thought I saw it. I know it goes down Hospital Road. I know it swings back through. It looks like it goes down the McCarthy Park driveway and everything else, which brings up the next question. So you should be running this through Building and Grounds for any use of the hospital property.
There's a separate Building and Grounds Committee for the Medfield State Hospital.
Okay.
John Thompson runs it. John Thompson is the chair.
I imagine it's
You just send me an email and we'll put you in touch with them.
going to be relatively light impact, I would think. But anything else, Bill?
No.
Okay, Mel?
This is the first the Parks and Recreation is hearing about an overflow parking plan at Hinckley. And that's Park and Recreation property, and our swim pond is located at Hinckley, and we are in full operation that day, as well as the park.
Okay.
So that will be a problem. We haven't seen a plan. Did you say something you have going, also you're going to be using McCarthy Park?
Montrose.
Oh, Montrose, okay. That's it.
Anything else, Mel?
No.
Laurel?
So just to be clear, did you think you had approval for the Hinckley overflow, or that was?
No, that was part of what
Okay.
I thought
Okay.
we were striving for here.
Okay.
Well, I'm one of the few residents who will be displaced. I live at 10 Green Street. I don't want it. I don't want 500 people on Green Street, all the cars parking there. How are we going to get in and out? Why are you not starting this race somewhere like they do the Angel Run at Medfield High School, so that you can accumulate people safely versus in a residential neighborhood that's densely populated? This does not make sense to me at all.
You'll need the microphone.
The short answer to that is that we are opening a tap room at 1 Green Street. So the idea behind this race is to promote the tap room. So if we start and finish it somewhere else, that will lessen the promotion of that tap room.
Well, there are a lot of businesses.
And I would just add to that, the idea would be with parking in Montrose, with the parking lot around the 1 Green Street location is where we would look to congregate people. I'm not saying there wouldn't be people on the road, but I just want to make sure that that's understood. That's kind of where we'd be looking to corral people. Yes, we are requesting a road closure because we would ultimately be setting up, a start and finish line arch. And certainly once the race goes, later on, we'd have people flowing through, so there would be congregation. But I just want to make it clear that's how we're envisioning this.
Well, a lot of people have opened. Many businesses succeed without a big race. And my take on this, the way I'm receiving this is, you want 500 people there to know that you've got a brewery there, so then there's going to be a lot of people there drinking. So no, I'm not real pleased with this at all.
Anything else?
So just
Mark?
give it.
So, are you requiring runners to pre-register, and if so, is there a cutoff, or they just show up that day and sign up, or does whatever? How's that going to be handled?
Typically, most people will pre-register, but we would accept registrations the morning of the event. Unless, we were in a situation where, well, I can't really think of a situation.
Well, I mean, suppose hypothetically the selectmen were comfortable with requiring pre-registration by a certain date and a cap on the number of participants. How would that affect you?
That's not very common. So I think a lot of people just tend to wait. I guess part of it would be how late you would require. Typically for these events, registration stays open until, maybe 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours, about the longest point out, because a lot of people wait till the last minute. They want to see what the weather's going to be. They want to see what their plans are that weekend. So, so anything more than that would have a direct impact on the number of people that would sign up.
Are you hiring somebody like RaceWire to run the registration for you?
Yeah, there's a lot. I've worked with many different registration platforms over the years, like a RaceWire.
Mark, what's the if it's behind your question?
The what?
I'm asking Mark why you
Some predictability in terms of participation, crowds, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we haven't done that with any of the other races that we've had.
We know that.
Generally speaking, they're not, with the exception of the Angel Run, the races that are happening in town are all fewer than 500 people.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm just trying to throw some things out on a preliminary basis. I think, without the police and if there's a safety officer as opposed to the chief, but having even vetted this at this point.
Yeah, and I think my reaction to this is, we appreciate your coming in. I think you've got general feedback from us. You've got a few more boxes to check, obviously. with the proliferation of committees that you have to go talk to, and the police chief and everything else. And so, I'd suggest that at this point that you go do that, and whatever details you need on what the regulatory scheme will be, what licenses you're going to have, and all that, we can deal with that down the road. You got a little bit of time here, and you can think about the start and finish question as well, if there's a way to accomplish what you're hoping to do from a promotional standpoint and starting and finishing it someplace else. There's another race in town that starts at Montrose itself. That's kind of locked in there, and that's kind of a nice way to do it. And you could still have people go down to the tap room from Montrose. It's not very far if you're trying to get people down there.
If he's going to pull a one-day license, it doesn't matter where he is, frankly.
No, I know, Mark, I get it, We get it, there's rules.
No,
We got it.
what I'm
And we'll
saying
figure it
is
out.
he
All I'm
doesn't
saying
have to be
is,
from
we've
the
got a little bit of
license.
feedback here, we're plenty of time in on this discussion, and so I would suggest to you that you guys check the boxes you need to check, figure out what you're gonna do, think about the start and finish and the rest of it, and come back. Right, I think you have from the board that there's no hostility to the notion of doing this in general. There's some details to work out. You got to talk to the police chief and all that. I suggest you do that, and we'll have a further discussion about it.
So one of the things that I would throw out to you is that I believe that your property where you're moving into, if not being a direct abutter of Montrose, is really close to Montrose. I mean, you have to walk through some trees, but and there may be a way to actually start it on the Montrose property and then have a cut through of the trees to get to your site.
We asked them.
Oh.
And they didn't want to. They said you have to be a non-profit. We're hopeful we can persuade them in time, but I'm not sure if it's going to be this year.
I assumed that you were paying them something to make it appealing
All right,
to them.
so
We did try in many
deal with
avenues.
this and come back. 30 seconds, really. Give her the microphone. 30 seconds and 30 seconds, and then we'll move on.
Following Mark's suggestion, our other races aren't for alcohol, so I think pre-registering and making sure you're 21 years of age is a reasonable request.
Ms. Potts?
Well, we wouldn't serve anyone that's under 21.
We can't serve people under 21, that's not the question.
Right. But we'd want them to still run.
Maybe I just missed it. Eve Potts, 10 Green Street also. First of all, Mount Rose, I walk by there all the time. You have to go around on the sidewalk. You can't go through the woods there because I've tried it and it didn't work. But I was going to say, maybe I missed this, but when you finish, you'll finish off at 1 Green Street. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the road in front of the 1 Green Street.
Okay, so that will be all closed off.
That's
I was
correct.
just going to say, the other businesses there, it's fine, but the parking is pretty close with the other businesses. I assume you've already contacted them. 30 seconds is up.
And Mark, just so I understand the point you were making to them, is that a one-day license, if you didn't have the start and finish at 1 Green Street, that doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to let people have a beer tent or something.
Yes, since they're not using their physical location, other than the fact they'd like people to identify with it, but their service was going to be pursuing a one-day license, which can be at any location. So that actually provides flexibility to move the route around if that were a need.
We never did hear where the beer is brewed. Is it brewed in Medfield, or where do you make it?
We actually contract brew at the moment. We're based in Medfield. We're based at 120 North Meadows. We have a cold storage unit there, but we brew currently in Ipswich. We just found another facility to brew. At the new location, we'd brew on premise, but we would only sell what we brew on premise. So we'd have, it's another way of driving people to your tap room, exclusive beers.
Well, thanks for coming, and thank you for opening a business in town, and we'll see you when you come back.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, we're moving
Whose is this?
on
think he gave it to
to
you,
our
but you keep it.
ongoing budget review and discussions. Why don't we start with Facilities Director Amy Cullen? Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to ask you to have a microphone, Michael. Come on. No, you can either go to the podium, or why don't one of you go to the podium, the other one takes the microphone.
Good evening. Amy asked me to come with her this evening because the actual request was made prior to Amy being hired as our facilities director. Increase in the facilities budget for fiscal year 20 will be a 0.6 position, and tonight I just want to justify that 0.6 position for the facilities department. Before Jerry left back in August, we had an exit interview with him, and one of the recommendations that Jerry made was for the next facilities director to be successful, that we would need to add a position on the town side to alleviate some of the work for the coordinator, which is Wayne, because currently Wayne is trying to coordinate, but at the same time do some maintenance stuff on the town side. And it's becoming a little bit more difficult, so a lot of the maintenance stuff on the town side is being contracted out, so there's a cost to contracting those services out. So when I looked and looked at all the numbers, I didn't feel that a full-time position was needed on the town side, because currently they have a part-time maintenance person. So I felt that just adding a 0.6 to take care of the buildings such as DPW and Senior Center and the new public safety building would be sufficient on the town side. So what's happening currently and happening in prior years, talking to Jerry, is that, for example, if we had to do filter changes or belt changes for our HVAC system, that we've been hiring a technician for $137 an hour to change filters, plus what they call a driver's fee, which is $75 just to show up to the location. And we can do that in-house for much cheaper by having someone on staff that can do simple tasks that way. So what we did was we just put together a quick presentation. The hourly rates for outside contractors for an HVAC technician is $137 an hour, carpenters $75 an hour, electrician ranges between $85 to $125 an hour, and a plumber is about $85 an hour. So last year, the town was billed $43,719 for maintenance and repairs work, and that was labor plus parts. The projected hourly rate for the new general maintenance position, so we're requesting a $35,000 position with the assumption that the employee will be taking a family health plan at $17,440.69, and also, if you look at the OPEB cost to the town, which is another $3,590, the cost for that employee would be $56,031. If you divide that by 52 weeks, which would be about $1,077 per week, and divide that by 25 hours per week, you're looking at an hourly cost of $43.10 per hour instead of what a tradesperson is being paid just to come and do minor repairs here in Medfield.
So, Michael, just a quick question: is the 35,000 is that the 0.6 of the 56,000?
Correct.
That's where you get it. Okay.
No, I apologize. The 35,000 is a 0.6, I believe, of 60,000. So if we had to go and hire a general maintenance person at a full-time rate, the going rate is about $60,000. So we used that figure. I can go through the whole presentation because we did this for the warrant committee. We did it for the personnel board this past, I think it was last week. So I just wanted to give you an example. I'll just use one example. HVAC preventive maintenance at $137 an hour times 8 hours times 5 buildings times 3 times per year, because that's what is required to do filter changes and belts and so forth, would equal about $16,440 plus parts. So just in HVAC service for next fiscal year, you're talking about $16,440 plus the parts, and the parts you're going to have to pay for anyways. So we did that going forward. We did that for general maintenance. If you look at, we did it for electrical cost, and we did it for plumbing cost, and we looked at the estimated cost for fiscal year 20 for the deferred maintenance would be about $63,600. So adding an employee for $56,000, it's break even. I'm not saying we're going to save money, but I think in the long run is where you're going to see the savings as your contractors are going to continue to increase. So we're asking that this will also help Wayne, who is our facilities coordinator, meet with vendors and review projects and issues, review proposals, write up contracts, coordinate and troubleshoot emergencies, which right now he can't do those things because he's doing things as general maintenance. Amy, you want to add anything to that? Any questions? We're more than happy to take those questions. Like I said, everything else was pretty much level funded, except for, I believe there was a cell phone. It was transferred from I believe it was the technology
we were
budget.
carrying it in the IT budget, and we put it in the
Correct.
facility.
And it's going into the facilities budget.
Can you tell me why the cell phone's $150 on a month? It seemed like an awfully high cost for a cell phone.
So I believe that was it was for 2 employees, correct?
It's for 2.
Okay.
2 cell phones.
2 cell phones. Business plan.
Business plan, okay.
Pay higher rates.
Guess you do, yeah.
It's the same, I'm 153 from 5.
Is that right? Okay.
Pete, questions?
No. I appreciate it, Chief. I appreciate it, Chief.
So this makes sense to me. The other thing that I just wanted to bring up is that before Jerry left, I asked him about things that we could do to improve, and I relayed that to you at the time, Michael, that he told me that we should have a supervisor of custodians so that he didn't have to walk around and check everything. And I just wondered if that has been thought about or to be done so that Amy doesn't have to do that.
So yes, part of the plan, depending on if the .6 position gets approved, we're looking at Wayne to coordinate both the town and the school side. Similar situation that we have currently with technology, where Owen is paid out of the school budget and Carlos is paid out of the town budget, but they work together to troubleshoot and get things done. So we're looking at the same type of scenario where we can use Wayne to help, with vendor contacts and setting up contracts and setting up, jobs for both schools and towns, so that Amy can look at the bigger picture and work on the 20-year capital plan, work on, we're going to have the Dale Street building, we're going to have other projects on the town side that are going to need her attention, her full attention. And in order to alleviate that, we're looking at seeing, if Wayne can pick up those things. But, those are conversations I have to have both with the selectmen and the school committee to see if that will work. I don't think that we need an additional position. This is what I'm saying. I think with having Amy and Wayne and a .6, that we can address all issues both on the town and school side without increasing another position on the school side for something that can be done jointly.
Yeah, if you can do that, that sounds great. When I heard that Jerry had actually been walking around just to check to make sure that work had been done, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Gus?
So I have, this is probably as much as anything, just educational on my part. In looking at the budget request you submitted, which is the revised one, I'm looking at my basic question is, in looking at the operations side, not the salary side, there's a series of, I guess it's building contracts, which the Town Hall, Public Safety, DPW Garage, COA Library, Park and Rec, and Dwight Derby House. And then there's another series, the same sequence, that are repairs, looks like repairs and maintenance. The sheet itself basically says FY 2019 appropriated amounts, but the total looks like it comes out to what the FY 2020 request is. So I'm thinking maybe I'm looking at the real 2020 request in that column. First, I want to make sure I know what the information is that I'm looking at, because it's under the FY 2019 appropriated amounts rather than the budget request column.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the munis report?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I might be able to answer that. So on the munis report, I believe.
That's not the munis report, it's just the spreadsheet.
It's the budget worksheet is what it,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they get produced on munis.
Can I take a look at it?
Yeah. Here's, so my questions were, what were those and what were those? But this is FY 219, it says 233,110, which matches that. Okay.
So that actually, that's a munis report that's downloaded into Excel.
Okay.
And I do this on the school side. This is why I believe I can answer the question. What Joy did was she took the request for 20 and put it into munis, which matched the 19 actual budget. So what you're seeing here is budget versus request.
Okay.
Instead of budget versus actual.
I think the issue is that, at least in the one I have from the 1211 revision, there's nothing in the budget request column.
Right.
Yes, so if you look at correct. Because
You're saying that the request for 2020 is exactly the same as what your actuals were for 2019?
They're going to be what the budget was for.
What the budget was for 2020? No change in operation?
There's no change.
Okay.
So, and the reason why, when I was looking at those contracts, the contracts before Jerry left, which we tried to take all the contracts, town and school, and now they're all as one contract. So, for example, the elevator contract is one contract that includes the schools. Fire alarm system is one contract that includes the schools.
Okay.
So, trash removal, same exact thing. So when you look at those contracts, we're locked in for the next 3 years. There's no increases in those contracts.
Okay.
So we can keep those the same.
So is the first set of these, which are the contracts, is that kind of like routine clean, is that janitorial kind of stuff, or?
So one line item is your custodial line item.
And then the repairs and maintenance are?
Those are your elevator,
And so they'd be under maintenance contracts?
Maintenance contracts.
Okay. And then Mark, this may be a question for you. The only other thing is the bottom on that list is the Dwight Derby House. There's no custodial cost, but and it's $500 repair and maintenance. I'm just trying to understand, because we've talked about, when we talk about the Historical Society and things like that, Dwight Derby, the status of Dwight Derby as a house relative to town, how is that different than the Lowell Mason house? Or is it? Or the Peak
Well,
House?
it's not, potentially not, but it's at the moment, it's leased to a separate nonprofit entity who's supposed to be responsible for maintenance.
I'm obviously, it's $500, I'm not quibbling, but I'm just trying to understand policy. We don't do that for Lowell Mason, we don't do that for Peak House.
Lowell Mason is in kind of legal limbo.
Okay.
It's town-owned land. They got the house separate, and then they were supposed to have a ground lease with us to put the house there. When the house is always going to be the responsibility. I've given a draft to the ground lease to them, but we've never finalized it.
Okay.
But at any rate, the house is theirs, and it's their responsibility.
The town does not own the Lowell Mason house.
The building itself, that's correct.
Okay. In this case, then, with Dwight Derby, we're putting $500 into a repair and maintenance contract. Is that just because that's kind of like a?
We own the house, so ultimately, even though technically a tenant's supposed to be taking care of it, the town has an overriding interest in doing what it can to preserve it.
That's the issue I was trying to get. We own Dwight Derby, we
Yes.
don't own Lowell Mason. And we own the Peak House?
No,
No. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
town has nothing to do with the Peak House technically legally.
All right, just after the water bill with the society,
You're on the
I want to
lookout
get
for the
my
next
accounting
one.
straight, that's all. Okay.
Don't
got
think
it.
the Peak House has any running water.
Christine?
I just want to let you know, the Personnel Board met last Thursday, and the Personnel Board...
You want to just, before you get lectured by Jerry Kazanjian, you just want to move your microphone closer to your mouth.
Am I going to touch
there.
it? The Personnel Board approved this request unanimously. Their concern was, we've tried to build this department over the last 2 years. We've had some pitfalls along the way, and we need to give this department the tools it needs to succeed. They recognize that we're trying not to add any benefited positions, but they really felt this was important.
Anything further?
Nope. Good. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Parks and Recreation. Next, Kevin.
Similar, but has some.
Different? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's okay. Not really.
All right, Kevin Ryder, Parks and Recreation Director, welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Good evening. To go over our budget, there's not much to go over. We're level funded again this year, same as we've been the last 3 years. The only increase we have is for the step and grade for my 2 full-time staff members. So besides that, we stay level funded. What I did provide for you guys was some background information over the last few years as kind of the trajectory we are on as far as registrations and revenue stream for the Park and Rec Department. You can kind of see how our revenue has gone from fiscal year 2013, just over $434,000. It's one of the sheets towards the back, Gus. Just yeah, there you go. This chart. Yep,
Sheet was a good one.
So about $434,000 in fiscal year 2013 to the just completed fiscal year, we were shade over $733,000. So registrations have obviously been increasing. Our participation level has gone from just over 4,000 people in 2014 to almost over 8,000 people this past year. So nearly double the participation level. A lot of that's programs throughout the school year, including anything for toddlers through senior citizens, and our summer camps have absolutely exploded over the last 3 years. Thanks in large part to coordination with the school committee and their allowance for us to use the Dale Street School to house part of our program. So that's been a major help for us as the Park and Rec Department. One of the charts I have here, it's the one that has a lot of colors, and it's a pie, and probably the worst pie you'd ever want to have because it's very small slithers. But what I did with this is I wanted to kind of show you guys, those are all the programs that we ran the last fiscal year. So as you can see by the number of colors and slices of the pie there, a lot of different programs that we are offering at Park and Rec and successfully running at Park and Rec over the last year. So I thought that was a great illustration to kind of show you guys exactly what's been going on at Park and Rec. And then with our revolving account, I know there's always questions with our revolving account as our revolving account has grown to nearly non-existent when I first took over as director to where we are now. What I wanted to kind of show you guys is some of the expenses we pay out of that revolving account to kind of give you an idea of where that money goes. So for instance, over fiscal year 18, over $300,000 in just payroll alone to our vendors and our summer staff. And our summer staff was close to 100 kids this past summer. About $54,000 to maintenance, $8,000 to utilities, $4,000 to trash and portable restrooms. That's above and beyond what is included in our budget. So that's what we supplement what is not covered in our operating budget. So when our operating budget runs out, we pick up the slack based on our revolving account. And this also includes capital budget expenses that we've made over the last 3 years that have not come out of the tax base, but instead been funded through the revolving account by Park and Rec.
Any questions, Pete?
Well, it shows that you're running a really entrepreneurial department there. I mean, the town gives you $340,000, and then you're mushrooming that with another $700+ thousand. So that's like a great system to me. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes?
No, I think you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate that you're doing a good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Christine?
I have nothing.
Anything
Kevin and I
else
sat
you wanna-
together at the warrant committee the other night, so we're all set.
Anything else you want to share with us, or?
The only thing, to give you guys a brief update on our process with our the funding we had at town meeting last year and then from the ballot vote. We have hired a consultant for the Park and Rec feasibility study. It's a group called Abacus out of Braintree. One of their principals is on the Braintree School Committee, so he has kind of an insight on town politics. They came to town last Friday, took tours of some of the sites, including Dale Street School and the Fab Center and up at the hospital. So they're kind of in their fact-finding stage right now, and our hope is sometime this month to be able to have a public input session. Public can come and kind of voice their what they would like to see in a new park and rec facility, what they would not like to see, and kind of get an update on us as to where that project is. So that's kind of a brief update. Not much tangible I can share with you, but it is a slow-moving process. So.
And I trust that you got the memo from us?
No.
Okay, so we wrote a memo to you and Roberta and the school department last fall.
The first I've heard of it.
Okay, so I would request
I'm sure that gets to you.
that the memo that we wrote to you all, you can find it on the town website as well, but it probably would be courteous of us if we could distribute that memo to the recipients listed on the...
that memo?
We did.
Are we sure we finalized it? Because I just happened to be over at the center this afternoon. I brought that up with Roberta, and she also hasn't seen it, but
I'm 99% sure we finalized it.
We need to double check that, because I don't know that I actually have a final copy of the memo.
Yeah, there was a final markup that we approved, and I thought the instruction was to transmit the memo as approved.
So, but anyway, Roberta hasn't seen it either.
Really hasn't been sent to anybody. So I believe it was finalized. We can check the videotape, but we'll check the videotape. But I'm fairly confident we came to ground on what that memo said, and it just hasn't been distributed. Okay, so look out for that, Kevin. It might be a little bit dated, but it's just as wise as it was when we first wrote it. So.
It's not as dated as anything Mike was giving you, though, I promise.
Is there anything specific that we should know about now, or should I wait
I think the general gist of the memo was that as to all the departments, looking for buildings, looking for expansions, that you should be talking to each other, exploring opportunities for collaboration, and exploring opportunities to use space that the town otherwise owns, and also looking to piggyback on existing building projects that might be able to satisfy some of your needs, to wit, whatever gym is going to be built in the new Dale Street School, as to whether that gym can also be built to specifications that would serve your programs as well.
So I can answer that
I want you to read the memo, and then you can get back to us. It's just a general sense of advice of stuff to think about in the process.
Fair enough.
So, all right.
Could I make two comments? One, for any department heads who might be watching this Selectmen's meeting by video or something, I would just point out that they should note how smoothly budget reviews go with department heads who come in with level-funded budget requests from the prior year. Just to
Sorry.
just to point out for others, and I want.
Sorry, Chief.
And I want to. This is informal, and it's just to share something that's been on my mind about the new Parks and Rec facility when it takes shape. And Mel, you've heard of personal opinion from me 5 or 6 years ago about this. At some point, you're going to have an idea for a Parks and Rec facility, and you're going to have an idea of where it goes, and you're going to have a desire to want to do it. I am very concerned about the timing for that if your plan is to come to the town and ask for the town to pay for it. And Mel, you've already heard, my point here is not first and foremost to be scrimmy. My point here is a concern around what the Parks and Rec facility needs to be for the people who want to use a Parks and Rec facility versus what the taxpayers as a group might be willing to pay for if that's where the money for the Parks and Rec facility is coming from. I'm concerned that there could be a mismatch there. Over and above that, given the Dale Street School project coming down the pike somewhere in the next, I don't know, funding for that 3 years, maybe from 2-3 years from now, and the magnitude of the likely magnitude of that funding, for your all sakes, I'm very concerned about what the cost of a Parks and Rec facility, how the taxpayers will respond to that if it's being added on to what I think is going to be a significant spike in our debt level. So I say that not because I'm staking out a position or where I'm at. I'm just saying, be thoughtful about that. When we moved here in '95, Parks and Rec was like number 5 on the priority list. When my kids, one of them wasn't even born yet. And I kind of wish in retrospect that the town had just gone to Parks and Rec in '95 and said, look, if you want a Parks and Rec facility, you've got to fundraise for it. Because then my kids, 2 of them are finishing their last year of college now. There might have been a Parks and Rec facility if we had just had our eyes open. So I'm not telling you which way to go. I'm just asking you to be thoughtful about that, looking at the town situation, because I'm worried about a collision coming in here that at the very least is going to result in a delay in this project beyond probably where you want it to be.
Yeah, just speaking, Rob Tatro is also here, one of our commissioners, as well as Mel. Speaking on behalf of the commission, I mean, that's on the forefront of our minds as far as what it would be to the town as far as a debt for funding it. And there are things that we have in mind as ways that can be combated, and hopefully with this consultants and their feasibility study that will come through too. So,
okay, thanks.
So we appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay,
guys.
sure.
Yeah. Although, I mean, realistically, it's not going to be a terribly material addition to that number, right? If you think about what the number is going to be, it's going to be 10% of the Dale Street number or something. But we'll have to see how it shakes out.
Hope it's.
Depends on what the Dale Street number is.
Depending on what number you think this number is, I'm hoping it's not 10% of the Dale Street number.
I bet it would be 10% or less. 10% or less than the Dale Street number would be my bet. But we'll have to see what the feasibility studies show.
Unfortunately, if Mike is right, my concern just tripled.
Okay. Duly noted.
Okay. All right.
For your time.
Fire Chief William Carrico, welcome. Another level funded budget, correct?
Next year. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
For the next 2 hours, I'd like to talk about the Are you guys well? Okay, obviously, what I'll do, I'd like to start off with ALS. Since November 30th, we've been ALS. We have 6 paramedics on staff, 7 if you count me. In the first 10 days of going ALS, we had 44 calls. So we had an extremely busy period right after going ALS. We were given the go-ahead on or about the 3rd week of December to operate as a full ALS system. So it took us about 30 days, and we cleared the precepting requirement from the medical director. So we are now completely operational. We have 2 shifts of double medics, and we have 2 shifts of single medics. We have protocols in place to call back medics through mutual aid, which would be the easiest thing for us, since a lot of our staff who are paramedics don't live within a reasonable response time. So, the ALS system's going very well. We are meeting the demand. We have an extremely limited amount of mutual aid coming into the town now. We have had a couple of mutual aid ambulance calls because it was second medicals or a motor vehicle accident. We had multiple patients, so we had to call in a mutual aid ambulance. One of the things that I put into place is the second ambulance. We now have a policy. It's licensed. So we now can call that second ambulance, tone it out, and get it on the road if we need to. It is a basic level truck. And we would still need ALS Intercept to provide ALS services, but we're still able to collect revenue with our own vehicle. And one of the things that happened in the past is because we didn't have that second vehicle license, there was no policy in place to recall people for the second medical. We were just giving that revenue up to other communities. The police would respond with the mutual aid ambulance, and I think at the time when the previous chief was here, he would respond. But we weren't collecting any of that revenue that was out there. It was being lost. So now we have a policy in place where we can actually start using that second ambulance. So we haven't used it yet. Just the opportunity hasn't happened. But it is in place and things are going well. December revenue, we're up about $12,000 for December. The numbers haven't really been finalized yet. You also have to remember that we were being precepted at that time, so some of that revenue that was collected we have to split with those mutual aid communities. I tried doing a deal with some of the other communities around us. Where I came from, we had basically, I needed a paramedic just to sit there and watch the skills that were being performed and then write a piece of paper that said he's doing a good job or he's not. And that was basically all I needed. And usually you could pay about $250 and call it good. Here in Norfolk County, the deal was that if you called for a mutual aid ambulance, you split the revenue. And that was the deal that's been out there for years. I tried to get around it, but working with our neighbors, I honored it, and then I just pushed Dr. Valkanis to get that approved as fast as possible so we could separate ourselves from the need of our surrounding communities. Looking at the fire department's budget, obviously we do have an increase. It's around 8.5%. The majority of it is the hiring of the 4 additional paramedics. If you look at the cost for 4 additional paramedics for this upcoming fiscal year, it's about $262,000. And then I've also added about $26,400 in supplies and equipment that we need to maintain that operation. As we go into the first year of this is going to be the most difficult. Obviously figuring out the salaries for firefighters is very simple. You multiply how many hours they're going to work by their hourly rate and you get a number. But when it comes down to supplies,
when you said 8.5%, there's an alarm.
Sorry. Well, it's a little slow. So as we go through this, the first year is going to be the toughest because there's a lot of unknowns. How many medicals are we actually going to have? What is our supply needs? What are they going to be? So I had to do a lot of calculating and say, okay, this will get us through the first year, and if it's over, then we cut it back next year. So. As I went through my budget, one of the things that I had looked at is I looked at the previous budgets that were previously done. And one of the things for vacation time, personal time, holidays, and sick time, there was budgeted $26,000. I couldn't come up with that number no matter how many ways I did it. So I went and I multiplied, how many hours of vacation time each employee has, multiplied by their overtime rate, and I came up with a number how much I would need to cover the shifts. One of the other issues we have with the vacation time is there's 840 hours of unfunded vacation time that's on the books due to contractual and the personnel plan policies with carrying over overtime, or vacation time rather. I'm concerned about that. There was an MOU that was put into place to rectify that. It has not been executed yet, and there's a reason for that. Because right now we're at 60% of the budget year completed, and I'm at 57% of my budget expended. So if I go and I start spending out some money to pay off firefighters for unused vacation time, I'm afraid it's going to impact the budget in a negative way. So the agreement that I have with the union is we're just going to hold off. My hope is that that vacation time will be utilized, and as we don't fill some of these shifts, I can basically just watch that number dwindle down. But it's still in place and it's still in play. One of the other parts of that is the number of firefighters that actually wanted to take advantage of it all of a sudden increased. And I couldn't support that financially. It would be a burden to the department. We would be in the negative. Because typically what I do is every time we do a warrant, I do a cost to complete for the department. So I always look at how much money's been expended to how much of the fiscal year is there, and then I look at each one of the budget lines. So I try to make sure that we're always in the positive going into each warrant, and I always have enough money to complete the year. Obviously, the storms, we had that couple of storms or the potential for storms. So I upstaffed the department to make sure that I can get the ambulances on the road, to make sure we have coverage. You don't want firefighters responding back during the storm. Obviously, if we have a building fire, it's game on. Everybody's going to run back. But to get the ambulances out the door, I want to make sure they're at least staffed so we can get them on the road. So luckily, the storms haven't been that bad. So we've been in pretty good shape. Now that I say that, we're going to get hammered, and the budget's going to go to hell. Stipends, in the previous budgets that were submitted, we had some stipends for positions. Let me back up. There were some stipends that were funded for positions that we didn't have filled. So what I did was I just subtracted out everything that wasn't filled, and then the stipends for the firefighters are contractual. They have their medic stipend, the EMT stipend, the EMS officer stipend, and then you have the stipends for the call officers. Running through for training, we have about $23,000 appropriated for training. Historically in the department, We do about 1 2-hour training session per month, so 24 hours multiplied by what their rate is gets me the training number. Training's established by ISO, the Insurance Service Office, which defines how our insurance rates are set. Their requirements are much more stringent than what we're actually doing. They want to have 16 hours of live firefighting for each one of the firefighters, plus every officer has to have another 24 hours of training. So we're trying to hit those goals and satisfy the requirements of ISO. And one of the other things that I've done is I've mandated shift training for each one of the shifts. So every day that they come in, the full-time staff is required to do 1 hour of training on whatever. If they don't have an idea on what the training, they come to me. But that'll also help satisfy that ISO compliance rating. So we're trying to do a lot of the proper things to get the things, the job done, and it satisfies some of these requirements that are set by other agencies. One of the biggest things I think that you guys might be looking at is the recall line. So on the recall line, I've actually lowered it about $60,000 from my original estimate. And what I did was, I'm predicting that we're going to have about 220 box alarms. So the box alarms are how off-duty people come back. So that's how the call force is called. Last fiscal year, in 2018, we did 180 recalls. Because we're now trying to staff that second ambulance, I've added another 40 recalls to that, so I'm looking at about 220 recalls. Originally, I had applied 220 recalls to each one of the call firefighters. And I started looking at that, and then when I talked to Mike Pastore, I started thinking, well, that's really not an appropriate way of doing it. It should be based on the previous responses. So what I did was I went to that 180 from the previous year, and I came up with a percentage for each one of the call firefighters. So if you have, like, the deputy comes back to 79% of the calls, I applied 79% of the calls to that 220, and that's how I ended up lowering the number, $60,000. So right now, I'm looking at $1,449,000 for the budget as the total cost. Typically, when I'm doing my budgets, I have about 7 spreadsheets that I put together, and I calculate almost everything that I could possibly think of.
Chief?
The $1 million, does that include the administration and ops together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yep, total package.
Okay.
Yep. Now, I didn't know, do you want me to continue to go through some of the lines? Is there anything specific that you want to talk about?
Why don't we go to questions, and then we can go.
Okay.
We can continue. Pete, questions.
I guess I'd first ask about the, you mentioned that there's single medic shifts on the ambulance.
Yep.
And are we, I had the sense that we're supposed to have 2 paramedics per.
We operate with a PB waiver. We're under that PB waiver.
So we've got a waiver to go with 1.
We are allowed to operate with that staffing. And now it's all based on the acuity of the patient. So if somebody comes in with a high priority chest pain call, we have to start a second paramedic. If it happens during the day, then I'm available and I can respond. Otherwise, we would go to a mutual aid company to get that second paramedic.
Okay.
And what obviously the plan is as we have attrition in the department, any new hire is obviously going to be a paramedic.
Yep.
So we'll slowly start to backfill. So we're in a good spot. So, about 50% of the time we can, going out the door, we have those 2 paramedics sitting in the truck. And one of the things that I did is,
Did you say 50% of the time?
Yeah, 'cause we have 2 shifts of 1 and 2 shifts of 2. And one of the other things that I've done is when we go mutual aid, if we're going to go mutual aid to a fire, then the guys jump in the truck and they go, if it's a 3-man shift. If it's a 2-man shift, then we'll wait for the recall firefighters to come in. But if they go into station coverage, I put a directive out that they leave the paramedic behind so we can always maintain the ALS in town. So I think that's the proper way of going, to make sure that we always have somebody back to cover ALS.
Secondly, I was wondering if the income increase from the going to the ALS service is going to fall in line with what was expected.
Well, I was looking at those numbers earlier today, and the numbers for November were even higher than the numbers for December.
Oh.
So, I think once we get into January, then we really can take a look at what's happening, because now we're not worrying about having those other guys come in to be our ALS for every call like they were, what was happening. You know, so and it's going to be tough. It all depends on the number of calls. You know, when you guys were just talking earlier with us, you know, down in June 30th, where this place is not very busy. Historically, the firefighters have always said that the summertime is our quiet time. We're in a pretty good quiet time right now. Things have trickled off to a couple of 1 or 2 a day right now. You know, and it's a lull. And the numbers are about 90 calls for January. And right now, you know, we're a little behind, but February is a notoriously slow month for fire services.
Is that 90 ambulance calls for the month?
Oh, no. It's just 90 total volume. I was looking at those numbers within IMC, which is our fire-based information tracking system. So it's a combination. I would have to go back to the system and actually produce, you know, print off the numbers for what each type of call was.
Yeah.
To get that for you.
My recollection was that there were around 600 ambulance runs a year or something like that.
Yeah, last year I think we did 700 medicals, and of that there was 179 ALS calls. And I would think that we would probably be up on over 200 for this next year coming in. We had a lot of calls that we had gone on that I was physically witness to that should have been ALS. That we just, okay, we're not going to wait for Westwood, we're not going to wait for Norfolk, we're just going to jump on the truck and drive as fast as we can and go to the hospital. Is that the best thing for the patient? You know, you can do a lot of interventions in the back of the truck. So if you have somebody who has a broken hip, it's extremely painful, you need to have some kind of pain management. So in lieu of waiting for a mutual aid ambulance to come and give an IV and then administer some kind of narcotic to reduce the pain level, you know, you're driving as fast as you can to get to the hospital, and it's uncomfortable for the patient. Now, is that really what's the best thing? In my mind, no. In the eyes of OEMS, you know, we're operating at ALS, we should be treating at the ALS level. In that delay in getting the meds on board, you know, you can put an IV in less than 5 minutes, and you can start doing the drawing up of the drugs while you're driving the truck to the hospital. So, you know, we have a much better service than we did. We're able to get on scene faster. We have great turnaround times. One of the questions from the warrant committee last night is how much time do you spend at the hospital? And where I came from at Sandwich Fire, you had anywhere from a 2-hour turnaround time at the hospital. When we first went ALS, some of the firefighters that have been here for a long time were kind of upset because the rules change now that we're in ALS. So if you go to the hospital and you administer a medication en route to the hospital, you have to exchange that drug, so when you leave, you have the same amount of drugs to make your unit operational. In order to do that, you have to write out the EMS report, and you have to hand it to the pharmacist if it's a narcotic that's been administered, or you have to at least start it, get the run numbers so you can enter it into the Pyxis system. So the Pyxis system is basically, it's an ATM for non-narcotics, so you can get Benadryl, you can get amiodarone, all these other type of drugs that aren't narcotics, and basically you can just, you know, you plug in the patient's name, you plug in your ID, the call number, and it basically opens a drawer and you can take the medication out and then you can get back in service. So what these guys used to do was with the BLS runs, they used to run to the hospital, drop the patient off, give a verbal report, come back to the station, and then do their EMS report. So now there's just a little bit of a delay, and some of the guys that have been here are kind of upset that now we're spending too much time at the hospital. But we're meeting the requirement set by the medical control doctor that we at least have to start the paperwork and get it going, hand it to the pharmacist to get any type of narcotics that have been delivered. So it's probably adding about 30 minutes to so we're looking at, instead of a 40-minute, 30-minute round trip, you know, you're into it for about 60 minutes now. But you have to remember that if there's a high acuity patient or if there's another medical, that we have some protocols that we put into place. So if A2 is responding to a call and A1 is at the hospital, instead of calling for a mutual aid unit, we have the ability to say, A1, clear the hospital, meet us on the way. So then we'll be utilizing our own ALS intercept, which makes sense.
Okay. Pete, further questions?
What you said just raised a question in my mind. How long is the average ambulance run?
If it's a BLS call, like I said, about 30 minutes. If it's an ALS call, you know, 45 to an hour. I'd probably say an hour. It all depends what was delivered. what was administered. If you're just transporting somebody, you have them on the monitor, and you didn't give any type of medication, you put an IV in, then there's nothing to exchange at the hospital, so you can come back and do your report.
So is that half an hour on a BLS run from the station to the hospital back to the station?
If it's a BLS run, it's about 30 to 45 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
that's a lot faster
It's pretty
than I
quick.
thought it was.
And like I said, where I came from, you were looking at 2-hour round trip for medicals. 20-minute drive to the hospital, depending on where they were going. And then from where I was, down to the Cape, with the entry protocol that we had, if you had a trauma, you had to drive from the Cape to South Shore Hospital. Here we're so close to Boston, it's very easy just to run up to Boston if we had a trauma. So. We've flown out a couple of people. They're real severe patients. In lieu of ground transport, we've flown them. So we try to do what's best for the patient in every aspect of what we do and what we deliver as a service.
So the last question that I had to do with the training, and you mentioned this ISO group sort of mandates what the training should be.
Yep.
And that we're running a little bit below their hours, it sounded like.
Yep.
Is that something that we need to get? We're looking to get up to?
Let's build it up over time.
Say it again?
Let's build it up over time.
Okay.
And one of the issues that we had with the department is we had extremely poor documentation. One of the times that I was driving into the station, one of the officers was driving with that old bucket truck. He had driven past me, so I was like, I didn't hear him sign on. Where was he going? So he had received a phone call to the station for wires down, and he had gone out to cut the old fire alarm wiring that we had. When he gets back to the station, I go, did you make that a call? That was a public service? He goes, oh no, we never do. And right then and there, I knew that the documentation that we were doing is inadequate. So with the purchase of IMC, which ties in the fire record management system with the dispatch record management system, instead of the fire, what used to happen is the firefighters used to go on the call, they'd come back, they'd create a handwritten log for the number of calls that they did, and then they entered that into the fire server, which was Firehouse. Errors, duplicate calls, forgetting to enter a call. So now all the calls go through dispatch. Dispatch enters the calls, enters the apparatus that's electronically transferred into the fire department's record management system, so we don't miss anything. And we want to make sure that everything that we do when we talk to the public or touch the public with a service is documented. And on the fire prevention side, we track fire drills and lockdown drills. It's all this stuff. We weren't using that record management system for any of the permitting at all. So now we have automatic permitting. Everything's done within the computer system. It's got an online schedule. Before they had one of those little flip calendars and then write the address with the person's last name. And that's when you knew you had an inspection on that date. So now they log into the computer system, they hit the inspector schedule, it comes up with all the inspections, the dates, the times. You hit print, it prints off the report, so you don't have to go and print some Excel spreadsheet and then sign it. And so everything's automated now, it's paperless. That's why I didn't have any handouts, everything's paperless.
And that's, you refer to that as by the initials IC?
It's IMC.
IMC. That's a new package?
That I had gone before the Permanent Building Committee shortly after I started, and I had wanted to appropriate some money. Originally, Chief Hollingshead was starting that process of trying to replace Firehouse, so I had gone to the Permanent Building Committee and asked if there was any money that they could release to me to purchase this record management system, which tied into the dispatch record management system. So now everything is seamless and just goes right across.
Oh, good, good. So if I call into dispatch and the ambulance shows up at my house,
yep,
has all my information been transferred to the ambulance, the computer in the ambulance?
No. What happens they still have to physically hand enter, physically have to type into the we use ESO as our patient care reporting
There's no way to have the information from the dispatch, so you just have to enter it once, is what I'm thinking.
No, well, that's in a perfect world, and where I came from, that's another purchase, and that's another, another module of IMC. What happens is they end up doing an integration software with the ESO platform, so it ends up taking your address, the reason for the call, the times of the apparatus, and auto loads it into the patient care reporting system. Right now it's baby steps, because if I throw too much at the department, sometimes I can get them overwhelmed. And I want to make sure that we have a solid knowledge of the process moving forward before we start building out a little more. Perfect thing would be mobile data terminals in the truck. So if the ambulance were to respond, and then all of a sudden dispatch became busy with police work, we could physically put ourselves on scene, say we're en route to the hospital, put ourselves all at the hospital, all by pushing little icons on the screen. It's a great system, and it would relieve some of the work that the dispatcher would be doing. But once again, it comes with a cost.
Yep.
And does the cost hit the, if we're doing 2,600 medicals a year, like I was down on the Cape, that might be a good thing, because dispatch can become overwhelmed really quick. We're doing 700 medicals a year that we're responding to. You have to remember, when I say 700 medicals, within the National Fire Incident Reporting System, the 300 series of calls that are generated are EMS calls. So it could be motor vehicle crash, no injury. It could be a fall, somebody slipped out of bed, that's all classified as an EMS run. But the actual, then you break it down by transports, if that makes sense.
Yep. So the last question I had to do with the training, and I just wondered whether the training in the firefighter service all has to be sort of where you go out to a classroom, or is there an ability to do it online?
Well, actually, we're extremely lucky, because there are online offerings. The Mass Fire Academy comes down and they do impact classes, which we're taking advantage of. So they'll come down and they'll do a 2-hour classroom training. We have one coming up on cyanide emergencies, cancer awareness in the fire service. Right now, the guys are over to the pond down the street, and they're doing ice rescue training. Just by coincidence, we pulled a dog out of the Charles River this afternoon. And it just by coincidence happened. It was a pretty easy rescue. The dog was about 15 feet out. It looked like he was standing up with his paws on the ice. Just couldn't get himself back up, and we were able to get out there real quick. But just by coincidence, the ice rescue training was for tonight. One of the things that we did when we were going through the hiring process is we hired a firefighter paramedic who's also an EMS instructor coordinator. So he's licensed to teach EMT and paramedic courses. So we are taking advantage of that. So what we did today is I spent most of my day with several other of the paramedics in advanced cardiac life support recertification class. So that's basically how to treat stroke patients, how to treat patients that are in cardiac arrest, identifying different cardiac rhythms, what medications are administered. We went over airway intubation. So it was a pretty involved class, but we did it all within in-house, and it didn't cost us anything with the delivery of the program. We didn't have to pay an outside agency, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, good. So I'm just kind of thinking of other issues. When you do training, I mean, you usually have 3 people on a shift. Do people come in for the training?
Yeah, it's open up to every department member.
Yep.
It's advertised. I've issued a yearly training calendar, and it's updated as things change.
Oh, good.
Every department member is allowed to participate. My goal is if I can get 80% of the department there, I think it's a win for us. And I get that 80% number from the Chief of Carver Fire. The Chief of Carver has 75 call firefighters out of 3 stations. And he has always told me, if you can get 80% of your department to a training, you're doing a great job. And you have to think about it. If you're looking at the budget, if everybody showed up, the budget is going to blow really quick. So it actually it's a little bit of a budget ease for me if I get 75%, 60%, I'm not spending as much money. So I guess that's me trying to be conservative and justify it. Within the rules and regs, it does specify that the chief can establish rules for minimum standards for training and responses. And I've only been here 7 months, and I'm still trying to learn personalities. There's some intrinsic motivations for each one of these members. You have guys that aren't available during the summertime. They just can't come back because they're landscapers. They're working 7 o'clock in the morning to 8, 9 o'clock at night. And now in the wintertime, obviously there's no work, so you see them every day. So you have to take into account, each one of these personalities and what's happening within their home life. You can't just go and arbitrarily say, okay, you have to show up to 80% of this and 100% of that. So you have to look at each member individually.
Thank you very much.
Gus?
couple of actually points as the former Selectmen's rep on the ALS study committee. I have this little informal scorecard in my head where we had said it would be $400,000 for ALS, of which about $380 is department costs, and we passed a $250,000 override last year with the recognition that on the fire department budget, the other 150 of that 400,000 or 130 of the 380,000 would show up. And I'm actually, this is a question both for you and for Christine first. I'm checking my mental score sheet. When I see the increase that you have on the salary line under fire department operations, where it might have been as much as 130,000 to make up that difference between the full-up cost for 4 paramedics. Well, you're well below that.
I was anticipating the question.
Okay.
Going from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 20, there's an increase of 322,338.
Okay.
So when you had told me 400,000, as much as I would like to take the 400,000 and then run quickly out the door, I just, trying to justify the numbers and get what we need to be operational. And if you add the 322 with another 26, I think we're well within it. I think it's a number that's sustainable. Once again, this is that transition year, which is going to be the hardest to try to narrow it down. Really what I've done in the past is when I hit 3 years of data, then we really can say, okay, here are the trends, and you can really get a great handle on it. This first transition year is obviously the hardest.
So my main point was just to recognize that I appreciate the efforts you've been doing to actually bring this in on the cost side lower than what we had really originally projected. And I wanted, as long as my accounting is correct with both of you, I just wanted to acknowledge what you've done on the budget side. That actually was better than what we had anticipated. On the revenue side, this may be a harder question for you to answer, but it's an important question by the time we get to the town meeting, because it could have an impact on what the Prop 2.5 limit actually is. Mm-hmm. The reason that the override last year was $250,000, even though we were anticipating a $400,000 increase in costs for 4 paramedics in kind of gross estimating. The reason we didn't need the other $150,000 is we were anticipating we would be getting $150,000 in increased revenue, both from mutual aid that we did not have to pay out, which was about $87,000, and then the anticipation that there would be increased income. I don't, at this stage, because you haven't been running ALS very long, it may be premature, but for FY20 purposes, I'm curious what incremental increase on the revenue side we're carrying, or we should be carrying. You may not know the answer to that yet. Obviously, in the model, in my informal score sheet, the answer is $150,000. My question is, do we have any sense at all of whether that $150,000 or some other number is the right number for us to use on the revenue side for the town for FY20?
You know what? And honestly, I think it's a safe number to use.
Okay.
Really, it'll show up in January, February, and March. What is our revenue that we have there? Because we're officially off. We're not using mutual aid as of the 3rd week of December.
Okay.
And then you'll start seeing that revenue stream that's coming in, and that'll tell you right there.
Okay. So, Christine, I'm not sure where we're at right now, what we're using, and I recall Mike Sullivan commenting that you just can't pull a number out of the air and decide to use it, that there's a certification process. But I will be interested to know, before the town meeting at least, what that number is that we're claiming, because that's going to probably directly affect the Prop 2.5 limit that we in the warrant committee are working against.
Right now, we're carrying 125,000, which is what 125,000, which is what Mike had put in as his estimate.
Okay, so it would be helpful if at some point.
Well, yeah, once we get more data, we'll have a better understanding.
This is the game we always play going into the end of the budget, is figuring out every place we can legitimately pull revenue and push off expenses to get to a number that everybody is relatively happy with. So, okay. Chief, I just compliment you on what you did on that. And
thanks.
I appreciate that you got it up and running about a month early from the plan. And
yeah, in the whole process, from the time we submitted the application to the time that OEMS actually came out, was probably about 30 days. Yeah. And when I had called OEMS after I knew that the application was delivered, we were 2 weeks into it, and they were telling me, oh yeah, we're not even going to look at it for a couple of months. And that got me kind of upset. So I made a phone call to Sean Dooley, and within a week or two, OEMS was calling me up with a date and time. So I'd like to, thank him for his efforts. Reaching out to the reps that we have definitely made a difference.
Great.
Representative Garlick also, she, I did reach out to her also.
Good.
So it's just things that fell into place. There are some other communities out there that they waited 6 months for their ALS application to actually, go into effect.
Good to have good reps.
So, Chief, I had a couple of questions, but something you said adds another one. How do you get that 322 number?
Well, what I did was I took...
Because just comparing the bottom lines, I get a difference of 424.
Well, I took the fire rescue operations salaries, the total of what I needed, and then I also looked at fiscal year expended actual, which was 797,316.79.
From 2018?
Yeah.
797 what?
And this 797,316.79.
All right, so we must have done a reserve fund transfer.
That's my Brockton High math was off.
At that next one. So gets 40,000 difference. I'm still at like 385.
Now my number for fiscal year 2002 budget request for...
I'm just looking at the bottom right-hand corner, 1,182,973, right? Isn't that your number?
No, that's actually not 182.9. That number is actually 111.
Ah, there you go. I was looking at the wrong sheet. There's your answer. Question answered. All right, here is the actual question I came in with. You have in your Fire and Rescue Administration budget, you note that a call lieutenant retired and you're not filling the position.
Yes.
Why is that?
If you look at span of control in the fire service, it's 2 to 7 firefighters for every officer. And right now, if you lay out the way that the department's structured, I just don't think we're in need of another call firefighter officer at this time.
Are you going to add a call firefighter non-officer?
Right now, there's no one banging at the door asking to be a call firefighter in the town of Medfield.
Have you advertised for the position?
We have not. You have to remember, in order to bring people in, I need to train them. And my standard is that every new firefighter has to be an EMT and has to be certified to NFPA 1001. That's the baseline firefighter training. This was not the standard that we had earlier. So we were bringing people in and we were training them in-house. The full-time staff, like Adam Shanahan, he's going to be going to the full-time fire academy in May. It's a 10-week program. The call firefighter program is a Tuesday, a Thursday, and then I think every other Saturday. It's about 220 hours. Now, obviously, I have to pay them for training. That's an issue. That's something that we have to talk about. I'm looking at my next closest retirement on the call force is probably going to be about 3 years. I think we need to talk about funding, training, putting that whole package together. I'm just not there yet with the staffing that we have. If you look at NFPA 1720, which is how a fire department responds to building fires and emergencies, that document says I need at least 15 people on the fire ground to operate safely. Right now, we're getting people coming back on recall. I'm just not there yet to look at adding people to the call force. That's one of the things that I talked about during the interview process. I said that, having the size department that we have, we probably need another 10 call firefighters.
I recall that.
Yep. But you're looking at the way we operate. And I told this to the Warrant Committee last night. I said, really, you know what? We don't do fires anymore. We're responding to alarms. We're responding to CO alarms. A large majority of what we do is EMS-based. So we're an EMS system that does fires. And I think that we have to make sure that any new people that are brought on board are able to fulfill all of those positions. We have, I want to say, 7 call firefighters that are EMTs, 2 of which are actively involved in the EMS side. I am trying to change the culture and trying to get them involved. And it's just a slow process because there were some call firefighters that were actively interested in doing the EMS side, but they just weren't underutilized. I'm trying to fix some of those issues. I'm trying to change that, get people involved. And I like to see that happen before we go and start adding other people, Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I don't have anything else.
I still have another hour.
Well, we
No,
have
I've had the
two.
privilege of sitting through it as you did both 2 nights in a row, so I'm good.
All right. Get better?
I'd like to say I got shorter, but I don't think so.
Wow.
Thank you, Chief.
All right.
Thank you.
So on this budget topic, I was at the warrant committee meeting last night. I heard the end of the chief's presentation. No, I heard the end of it last night. And it was the same, so there were not a lot of changes. But the warrant committee asked me a question, which I answered, but I answered for myself, and I thought we ought to discuss it under this rubric, which is, and their question was sort of what's going to happen with the budgets under our jurisdiction, so the town side non-school budgets, and when it comes time to make reductions and all of that. And the answer I gave them for me was that, well, okay, if you tell us we need a number, then we'll get together and we'll decide what the budgets are going to be that we control. But we hadn't discussed this at all, and so I think they were, at least the ones who spoke up were, and Christine can correct me if I'm wrong, fine with that answer, but I thought we should discuss it from a process standpoint so we can let the warrant committee know whether we're going to be looking for them to tell us what the budget should be, whether they should tell us what kind of a number we should try to get to, and then we'll figure out how to get to the number, or something else. So, Christine, anything else on that point? I mean, I wasn't there for the prior discussion. Is that a fair
That's fair.
description of the issue? Pete, do you have thoughts on that?
I'm very happy to have them recommend budgets to us, if they would be willing to do that.
Okay.
They seem to be more intimately, I think they're more involved in the budget process than we are, so they hear a little more directly, I guess.
Okay. Pete? I mean, Gus?
Well, the whole reason I brought up the issue of that restructuring of the budget is so that we actually have some basis for deciding where things need to be. So my short answer on that is the first question is, and I would trust the warrant committee, it'd be the first place I would go to look for the warrant committee after it has reviewed all the budgets to come in with a recommendation on what they think the overall spending for the town should be. And that either will or won't fall within Prop 2.5 limits. So we have two situations. Warrant committee comes in, everything falls within Prop 2.5 limits, then unless we have some heartburn about some budget that's there that we don't like, that the warrant committee does like, I think it's really straightforward. If we do not have a total budget that's at a Prop 2.5 limit, then this framework that I shared with you last week, and that I'm still trying to nail down with more accuracy than we have right now with Christine and Joy and Georgia and Yvonne, what that will do is it will lay out a distribution between the town side and the school side budgets on what those numbers need to be. And the way I've set this, I was surprised, as I reported last week, I was surprised, to realize that historically, the way that I built this structure up, at least, basically the town side and the school side, for the parts that we're breaking out as discretionary, over the last 10 years, they've been more or less growing at a comparable rate. So the key point there is it's not a school versus town issue. It's that these two budgets have both been running in tandem. It is an issue of the drop-off in state aid to the town. We've gone from 73%. If you looked at the tax levy as a percent of the total budget and go back to FY10, our tax levy, which is 94% the burden of homeowners, is 73% of the total budget of the town was covered by the tax levy. For FY19, with the latest numbers I got from Christine, that number is 83%. So every single year, our burden on the taxpayers to cover our budget goes up by 1%. At Denise's state of our annual report the other night, she pointed out that our Chapter 70 aid was going from 6.1, it was 6.1 something, and for FY20 it's going up $75,000. So this whole trend of a cutback in the state aid, and the level of state aid to the town, is being felt on the taxpayers' shoulders to the tune of about 1% increase And we can only, if we're at 83% now, I guess we can keep that up for 17 years, and then we're really in trouble.
Well, because if your spending goes up 3% and your stated goes up 1%,
so
math is easy to do.
Right. So given that, what I'm trying to set up here, and the other surprise from last week, is that if you just isolate out the school and town budgets, despite the completely miscellaneous ways we go through the process every single year, it very consistently, at the end of the day, has 71% of that available funds going to the schools and 29% going to the town. So what I'm doing with this spreadsheet is I'm basically shooting for that same target to backwards calculate what the threshold for a compliant budget will be on both the town and the school side. That is the way I think at least the structure is something that we kind of said we wanted to put into the warrant report so people could understand the budget itself. It's not something that the warrant committee has committed one way or the other from a policy standpoint. This stage, I hope to be able to make sure they understand what I did. So if they like it as an idea, then they can adopt it, or if they want some other idea, they can adopt it. But right now, my personal view is that's how I would draw the line. If we have to get if we need an override or not, the reason that line will be important is that it will define it either as an override that's required for the schools, or an override that's required for the town, or an override that's required, this much is required for the town, this much is for the schools. And it's just to give visibility to taxpayers on what it is they'd approve if we get to an override. I say all that recognizing that, first off, recognizing that both the school and town have been moving, so I'm not trying to whip one side or the other, and also recognizing that the schools have not finished trying to drive down some of their spending, and Christine, for your part, because this spreadsheet is slightly different in structure than Mike's spreadsheet. I understood Mike's spreadsheet. I understand 92% of this, but the last 8% I have to work with you on to be sure that the accounting is all there, and then we should have some numbers that at least tell us where we're at. And then this actually for me gets to the point, we put down several budgets for the selectmen to approve, and I realized actually we're doing these reviews to make sure we are not actively disapproving any budgets, because as a selectman, I'm not ready to approve any budgets until I'm ready to approve the entire budget.
Right.
So
I think the warrant committee question is, however you get to, and I think the framework that you have is a good one for us to use. When you get that, what that framework gives you is a top line number. And I think their question is, are we going to defer to them as to how that top line number gets reached, or are we going to sit down and say, okay, within our budgets, let's say we have to reduce them by $250,000, we're going to decide which budgets should be reduced to get to 250 on the town side. My view was, when that question comes up of which budget should be reduced, I think we'd want the input from the warrant committee. If they say, look, our analysis of this is we really need this money, but it sounded to me like the discussion last night, when they get to that top line point, I think their preference would be for us to be the ones to say to the departments, look, we're that 250, starting with Christine. I mean, Christine will make the initial recommendation to us, and then we will make that allocation within the town.
I mean, so there's two things there. One is that, as we did last year, whatever we get, let's say that the warrant committee this year decides that that the town should approve a $250,000 operating override, just because they've looked at everything, and anything that you would cut from there is unconscionable. But as we did last year, we still have to go into the town meeting with a non-override budget. So yeah, I would agree. They would come back, Christine. I would certainly look to you first to figure out how to comply. But my inclination would be to go with the warrant committee's, view on
the big picture.
Yeah, the big picture. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, too, the override question is also a policy question, right? I mean, I doubt they're going to tell us we think we have to have an override. I think ultimately we're going to have to decide from a priority standpoint how important is any one piece of spending or the total amount we want to spend versus having an override on that. Because obviously the question of whether to put an override question on the ballot is our decision.
Although, I mean, the second year I was on the warrant committee came to the town with a recommendation for $500,000 override for the school. It was schools. It was initially for capital, and then it was an operating override. So it was first year was capital, but it was put in place as an operating override. Last year, when the warrant committee recommended their budget for the schools, that was actually the warrant committee recommending an override, because that budget was more than the non-override budget.
Right.
So I agree, it's our choice, but I wouldn't automatically say the warrant committee wouldn't make a recommendation if they thought it was prudent.
Fair enough. So I think we're agreed on that point. I think we can, Kirsten can convey that to the warrant committee.
I'll let the warrant committee know.
I was not as far out on a limb as I thought I was, so, or was worried that I was. Just on that kind of, I included, as we can move on from this in a second, but I included in the package just some information that I thought was interesting, kind of guys coming off the discussion that we had last week, and this question of the growth in the budget versus at least the expressions of pain that taxpayers are feeling. And so I put in the chart, and this is just an interesting thing to see for the last 5 years on our assessments and where the assessments have gone up, because I suspected that one of the factors in that pain index would relate to increased valuations at the lower end of the property valuation in town. And so if you look at how the valuations have changed over the last 5 years, which obviously drives the taxes as much as the tax rate does, I mean, pretty consistently, houses under $700,000 are growing at a much higher rate than houses that are over $700,000. So while the absolute amount of taxes are paid are higher in the higher end houses, those valuations coupled with the tax increases makes the individual tax bill increase at a much higher rate than the overall tax levy for people who are in that category. And I think that, and obviously those are also, I mean, more likely to be people who are going to be on a fixed income and have a lower income than the median income in Medfield, and are going to feel much more so the impact of the tax increase. There's nothing we can do about it, right? I mean, that's the way that the property tax works. And there's no question that if you look at, you follow the real estate market in Medfield, if a house is under $700,000, it sells immediately. If it's much higher than that, it takes a long time. And so obviously that's sort of the sweet spot in the market. But I thought it was interesting data just to think about in the impact that the spending and taxes have on different segments of the population. So that's an FYI.
So let me ask, because this chart confused me somewhat. I wasn't sure why it was here, so I appreciate the explanation. Yeah. I was looking down the overall line, and I was trying to figure out why
there's 800 houses missing?
Well, no.
300 houses missing?
If you look at the very bottom line, like for FY, or for 2018, the number of properties is 3,780.
Yep.
Which is a 2% increase over 2017. The average percent increase, is that the increase in the number of properties? What is
it's the increase in the house valuation. So a house that's under 475 went up by 5% in 2015, 4% in 2016. 1.5% in 2017. That's the
house valuation. Okay.
And then, Yvonne, in order to take out some of the noise, the system until recently wouldn't capture new growth. So if somebody put an addition on the house and the valuation went up because there was an addition on the house, she can take that out now. She's capturing that data now. So what she did in earlier years to try to take out that function of the valuation going up because there's an actual addition to the house, she just removed the biggest jumps. So if there was a 15% jump or a 20% jump in a house year over year, that probably means there was an addition put on the house as opposed to you've actually increased the valuation to try to get at kind of what and that's why we're missing, you know, the total number of housing units in town is about 4,400. So depending on the year we're missing, you know, there's obviously been a lot of renovations and stuff going on. Has anyone who's tried to get a contractor to return your calls lately? No.
Good luck.
And then the other thing I included, again, this is an FYI just on finances, and we'll look at this more when the Mayrock Legion project comes up. Courtney put together a pretty comprehensive kind of market study, and I thought some of the financial information about surrounding towns and how we compared demographically in her mini market study was interesting. And so again, it's not, we don't need to discuss it, but I just wanted to give you the heads up. That's why it's in there. It was interesting data, and she pulled a lot of information about towns that are near us, towns that are like us, put a fair amount of work into it. So I thought that would be of interest to people as well. Again, that's an FYI, and that's why it's in there. All right, so I think we're done with the budget. Vote to approve town administrator's 6-month goals that we had sketched out last week, and now we have the final version of it.
So I've given you, you also asked last week for a performance evaluation tool.
Yeah.
So I've actually tried to do two things. One, actually is one of the goals, so I guess I'm killing two birds with one stone, is we're trying to formalize all of our policies. So I've given you a town administrator review policy, which is the front sheet, which is right there. And then the next sheet is the actual evaluation of what you would use to evaluate this position.
Okay. This was not in our packet, right?
No, I just finished it shortly. Yep.
I was going to say, I thought I would have noticed this.
No, so you can hold on and have a chance to review it, but you did ask for me to bring something this evening to provide with the goals.
So any further comments on the goals and objectives that we have for January 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2019?
Nothing here.
I got a lot. I don't think we're final. So let me go through all of them, or at least most of them. First goal, update budget projection worksheets with financial team. Let me start. All of my questions around these goals have to do with what does it actually mean, and how do we know if you've done it? So that's where I'm coming from. So the first one, update budget projection worksheets with the financial team. That's something, this I assume is for FY20. My question is this goal simply saying do what we need to do to get ready for the FY20 annual town meeting and don't screw it up?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. I can live with that because you're demonstrating your grasp of the budget. I just want to make sure I understood what that meant.
Yeah.
Next one down, create budget calendar for FY 2021 budget process. My question here is, this is not a goal. To me, this is a job responsibility, but it's not a goal unless there's something different that we want from, are we actually asking you to change the process?
Yes.
So what is it that we're asking you to do?
We're asking to come up with a complete calendar of the budget process that we've not had in the past, and that is going to include starting the process much earlier than we have in the past.
So it's okay, so it's a clear, accelerated calendar is the issue here. The next question is, I'm looking for the metrics. So if we're going to do this, then how do we actually measure whether you've done it?
But I think that's the one that Selectman Marcucci put forth, and that needs to be submitted to the Board of Selectmen no later than the first meeting in June of 2019. And that's going to incorporate all of your financial policies into one calendar.
That's fine. Okay. So I got the metrics for those. Communications, the first one, the question I had around external communications was do we have specific, utilize existing websites, social media, increase online access to information as general? What are the specific targets do we have specific targets we're talking about?
I think one of the goals that we've talked about for the last several years, I know Pete's mentioned it several times, is that we need to get more of the information that's in the townhouse onto our existing website. We started to do that by putting the fiscal year 2020 budget online for the first time for people to review. So it's that kind of information to get out to people, announcing our board vacancies.
Okay, so
those are the kind of things we're looking for.
Because I like what you've done so far, I'm not going to fall on a sword on this one. My point is, this is a goal which is, you're going to show us things you put on the website that haven't been on before, and we're going to go, okay, there's more, that's good, you've done it. And leave it that way. I'm good with it because I like what you've done so far, and I'd just soon have you have total leeway. This is my comment to the three of us, but we're not actually setting up a goal that has any focus to it. It's just a directional thing, and as long as there's good activity that we like, we'll have.
Yeah, I think my reaction to that, Gus, is just that given this is sort of a 6-month goal and we don't have a full complement of staff, it's harder to put. I agree with you that it'd be better to have more detail on it, but I think for now it's just like we'd like it, from my perspective, continue in the right direction.
Okay, it's just so long as we all understand that. My preference with goals is that you have fewer of them and that they be more focused on an ongoing basis. I personally agree that in these first 6 months, the biggest issue for you that cuts across all these is demonstrate that you can step into this role, keep the momentum going on the things that we do, and make some marked improvements or discernible improvements that are just bringing your style and your approach and ideas to the table. So this 6 months I don't expect is going to be a rigorous, difficult, grueling process, but I'm just saying, but 6 months from now when we sit down to talk about it, I don't, without having a little bit of this in there, I don't know what we're going to talk about other than, gee, we like the job you did, good job, let's trudge on. The number 2 under communication is internal monthly department meetings. And I was just trying to understand whether number 2 under town government, work on identifying opportunities for town hall staff / building efficiencies, those two seem linked to me or related to me. It's a question, are those related?
No, under town government, number 2 would be more looking at the restructuring of town departments that I'd look at.
Okay.
We've been looking at restructuring the accounting department.
Yep.
Land use.
Okay. Then number 2 under communication, besides simply having those meetings, what's the purpose? What's the outcome?
We've never had department head meetings in the 20 years that I've been here.
Yep.
My outcome is to improve communication between the department heads.
Okay. So, okay, I'll buy that. So it's just trying, we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but we're pretty sure if we do more of it, it will be a good thing. And I'm totally on board with that. Human resources, everything was fine. The only one I had a question on 3, I-9 medical audit of HR files, just because I'm not smart enough to know what that all means. What's the reason that we're doing that?
So there's new rules and regulations regarding how you can, how your personnel files need to be set up. You can no longer include your I-9s within people's personnel files. They need to be taken out and removed and put in the safe.
Okay.
As well as medical information cannot be in your standard personnel file. It has to be kept separately.
Okay, good. And then number 1B under town government, it said implementation. So identify 5 highest priority areas for development of new policies, and then implementation to occur in 2019. My comment, again, looking for something real in 1B, I would have said develop plans for implementation. So in other words, whether those 5, I'm interested in the 5 high priority for sure, but I think in terms of something specific in 6 months, it would be what are the plans for implementation. Whether all of those plans involve getting all this stuff done in 2019 or 2020, I don't care if there's a reason why something should take longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, I'd asked for one additional category, which was your personal goals for personal development. So just to recap, against everything that's down here right now, I'm okay with all of it. It doesn't have to be changed. I now understand what it's all about. I would kind of like to hear your personal development. I will defer to Mike and Pete if they would like to adopt this as it's documented now and let you come back in informally at the next meeting with what your personal goals are. I'm not that concerned about formally memorializing them in your, I just would like to hear your thoughts. So if you want to have the vote on the finalization or approval of this, I'm willing to approve it without that section in, but I would kind of like to hear your thinking, and I don't care if it's formal or if it's informal.
Well, my question to you would be, are those personal goals something you're going to be looking to review her on in June?
Yeah. Okay,
then we should add them
okay.
and vote next time.
Okay.
What do you think, Pete?
I think they should be in there then, yeah.
Okay. So you're fine with the rest of this as written?
Yep.
And then, Christine, if you could just add a section on your personal goals.
Yeah, anecdotally, I would prefer some metric that says here's how it's measured, which I've got written down for myself right now, and which I'd be more than happy. But it's just giving it's more for us that 6 months from now when we sit down, we ought to be able to say, oh, this is what we said these goals meant, as opposed to simply they're either directional or just activity goals. So
if you'll add that, we'll put this on the agenda for next time and hopefully finalize it.
On the 19th, yep.
I'll be happy to give you a copy of this.
Sure.
And if you want to, obviously we can't discuss it before the next meeting, but if you want to run those personal goals by Gus before next Tuesday so you can get his feedback in advance, that might
Sure.
make that run more smoothly next time. All right, licenses and permits, consent agenda. Any objections, concerns, questions about the consent agenda items?
Nope.
We have a motion.
I move that we approve the items that are on the consent agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. All right, town administrator update. We have an update on the police chief search.
And the police chief search. So the committee met last Thursday. They are still reviewing and have not made a recommendation yet. They're meeting again on February 12th. They're hoping that evening they would make a recommendation, and we will have the interviews on March 5th.
March 5th interviews, right here.
Correct.
And then with the idea being we would deliberate and vote on a choice at a different time.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, I apologize if you said this while I was writing, but does the committee have how many there will be?
We don't know yet.
Don't know yet, okay. And just a process for those interviews, did the committee have any view on the process, whether we should do it differently than we did it with the fire chief, or?
No, they actually, they favored the process that you used for the fire chief.
Okay. So the way we did it, as you'll remember, was not a public Q&A session. We asked the questions. We did give the public an opportunity to write down questions for us to consider asking, and I think if anyone wants questions asked, they can probably email them to Evelyn in advance of next March 5th anyway.
Or the 5th.
And we'll decide whether to ask them or not. I think we just want to keep it, it'll make it a little smoother rather than turning into either a debate or sort of a public forum, which I think is probably more respectful to the candidates, and still has an opportunity for the public to get their questions answered, but without it becoming a kind of back and forth. Pete and Gus, do you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So that's the procedure that we'll follow with that. Anything else in the town administrator report?
Nope, that's all I have right now.
Oh, we had, okay, I think we did the selectmen action item list last time.
Yep.
So I don't think we need to do it this time. Selectmen report, Pete.
Close the warrant too, right?
Yes?
Okay, this one.
We're going to leave it open until the end of the, just in case somebody comes in. There could be
I assume.
running in with a handwritten warrant article. We're going to,
Just want to make sure.
I'm not going to forget to close the warrant.
Put that down as one of my goals.
Bill Massaro, Board of Selectmen goals for this year.
So I went to the Medfield Coalition on suicide prevention, and it was basically a meeting to meet with their two consultants that they're going to hire. They've got that $30,000 money that Denise Garlick got them from the state budget, and they're going to use a lot of that. I guess they've used some of that to pay for the referral service, interface referral service that is existing. That runs out in November, and so there's a question of where the money's going to come from to renew that at that point in time. But they're using the rest of the $30,000 to with these two consultants, one from Riverside and one from William James. Impressive couple of people, by the way. Went to Denise Garlick's report to the town, and she actually focused a lot on that $30,000 earmark that she got for the town. Let's see, I went to, Sarah got me to go to the Massachusetts MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Committee's program that they ran for the town, and they invited anybody in town, actually, but it was mainly filled with town employees, talking about resiliency for climate change and coming up with what we're gonna need to do. Had my office hours last week, had someone come in about affordable housing. Went to the Medfield Cares About Protection meeting, and they're working on, with their grant writer now, to come up with the grant application for the big federal grant, the $625,000 grant. And then the other thing that I've been working on through the Medfield Foundation is their volunteer awards, and the very impressive group of people that have been nominated this year for the volunteer awards. Richard Judge was nominated for his work with the Kingsbury Pond Gristmill Committee. Pat Casey was nominated by a triumvirate from the Warrant Committee for his Medfield State Hospital Master Planning Committee work, and also for the Economic Development Committee. Michelle Feinsilver Hoy, was nominated for her work with the Medfield Garden Club, Peak House Heritage Center, which is the new thing that they've started, I guess, to try to preserve the future of and improve the future of the Peak House, and for the her work with the library. Liz Sandman was nominated for her work with Medfield Cares About Prevention, the Lions, Medfield TV, Donate Life, Medfield PTO, Box Top Collection. And Michelle Barrett was nominated for her work with the Medfield Public Schools, the St. Edward's Parish, and a host of other things that Michelle has done. 3 nominations for the Youth Volunteer of the Year: Hannah Rogan, primarily for Miss Amazing, New Life Student Council Speaker, UCC Youth Group Leader, and a bunch of other things as well. Maeve Devlin for Best Buddies, things at the Medfield High School, and a bunch of other things. The kids just do tons of stuff. Morgan Caro for Golden Opportunities for Independence, New Home Life, Medfield Dance Academy, Miss Amazing, National Art Honor Society, National Honor Society. And then for a Lifetime Achievement Award, it was Steve Nolan and Marie Nolan. And they just have a list of things that they've worked on for the town of Medfield that is as long as your arm. And not only have they been on the committees, they've chaired them. It's just hugely impressive what the two of them have done for Medfield. So that's it.
Great. When will the winners be announced, Pete? When will the winners be announced?
The judging is on February 11th. All the we've invited the past. There were 4 people that were especially honored last year as the Volunteers of the Year and the Lifetime Achievement Award winners. They've been invited to come and judge. And then there's a couple people that get invited as the community representatives, and then it's the Medfield Foundation Board. And they're going to meet on the February 11 and make the decisions at that point. And then the reception to honor all of these volunteers happens on March 31 at the center, 3 o'clock. Everybody's invited, and it's a very interesting time to hear the people talk about why the person that makes the nomination talks about why they nominated the particular individual, and then the individual talks about why they do what it is they do, and why they find it interesting.
Thank you, Pete. Gus?
A couple things. Also, was it Denise's annual report? One thing that struck me in her comments, she was very candid about how challenging it is to go to the legislature, even though she's a senior representative, trying to make the case for help for a town like Medfield in the face of other less affluent or less advantaged towns that have educational needs. And I heard her talking about it, and she was talking about like having the representative from Brockton basically saying, hey, what are you saying you need money? We need money. Let me tell you about my problems. And I came away with a sense of how hard she's trying to make the argument and how much of an uphill battle it can be at the State House to get people to actually see us for the town that we are in the face of other pressures. And I want to personally acknowledge Pete for attending the resiliency workshop. I was thinking, I'm not sure if any selectman is going to be there, so I managed to get there for the last 40 minutes to at least see the recommendations. And as I walked in, there's Pete, who put in and did the hard work to be there all day long, doing it. So my hat's off to Pete for being there.
It was a very interesting process. They did a good job of leading us through.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I was glad you were there because you were far better positive message from the selectmen. We had the senior housing survey presentation at COA this afternoon. Thought it would be it's the same one we all saw here. Thought it would be, maybe an hour long. It turned into a 2-hour discussion, most of which was around senior housing and issues related to senior housing. It was the crowd was a little light, but the discussion was very good and very spirited, and we covered a lot of ground. One thing that came out of that discussion was a suggestion that we consider, they actually said holding one selectmen's meeting a month, and I suggested perhaps to test this out, one selectmen's meeting a quarter might be something that I'd put up as an idea for us to consider, but to actually hold one of our meetings at the center. And the point that this was, Roberta kind of spoke this one, but the point that she made is for some seniors, it's a little more difficult. It's difficult for the selectmen to find parking spaces here to come to these meetings, but if we actually held selectmen's meeting be a regular selectmen's meeting, not a special one, but if we actually held a selectmen's meeting at the center, it might be easier for the seniors to get there. So I said I would carry that forward, and at least for you guys to consider.
Would it be doing it at an earlier time too, or the same time?
We didn't get that far into it.
Do they know how late they go?
Yeah. I guess if we think it's a good idea, it'd probably be a good question to ask.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because we had a meeting there. We had an official selectmen's meeting there.
Yeah, we did. That was almost special, though.
Special
as
meeting.
Focused on senior
Well,
housing.
We can do the video recording and all that there, right?
At the senior center?
Yeah.
I don't know if it could necessarily go out live.
Yeah, it can't go out live.
No, but it can be recorded for posterity and all that. That would be my only concern, is just in terms of access to the meetings for people who watch them. I think if you could record it, I think it's a great idea. Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Either that, or maybe you guys can do it through Periscope, and we can. It's live. It's an app.
I'm old, sorry.
Okay. And then I was just curious, if anybody knows, I was just curious about how the Monday night Spring Street overlay hearing went. Anybody know?
I don't know.
It seemed to me like it should be a straightforward, good thing to do, and it should have been straightforward. I'm just curious.
There were no changes made after the hearing for going forward on the
Okay.
warrant, so I assume it went well.
So that, I've just learned that sometimes meetings that I think aren't going to be controversial are, so I was curious about that one.
Christine and I were both at the warrant committee last night, so I missed it.
And then I had two other things I wanted, one thought. At our last meeting, we agreed that we would take on the responsibility for the Historical Society water bill, and we'd pay that off. One thing, as I thought about that over the week, I was saying, well, that's great. We're going to take care of that this year. It's going to come out of the selectmen's budget. But this is a question for the two of you. Looking farther ahead, I was thinking, for something like a recurring cost like that, rather than just parking it on the selectmen's discretionary budget, I'm wondering whether, not this year, but going forward, whether we shouldn't transfer the responsibility for that water bill like onto the library budget and incrementally increase the library budget, so that it's not a burden. It's just that this is kind of, if we have a discretionary budget, it seems like it ought to be for discretionary spending rather than we just start transferring ongoing expenses.
You do have a line item in your budget for committee expenses, so you could pay it out of there as well.
That'd be fine. I just felt like making a long-term commitment on our discretionary budget for a recurring expense I didn't think about it until after our last meeting. It's like, I don't think I'd like it there. I'd like it somewhere else. So we ought to be thoughtful about. I can see why it could go to the library budget, because it's a building adjacent to the library. So it's just a question of the logic, rather than us remembering 20 years from now that at a meeting in January, after a heated debate, 3 selectmen whose names we no longer remember decided that they would pay that particular bill, and nobody knows why. So it's just, I want to put that on the table. It's not urgent. And then the other question I had, one of the information pieces we had was from this the sheriff of Norfolk County.
Yeah.
And it was a nice cordial letter, looking forward to meeting with us. I kind of get a kick out of the tour that he offered. But my question is, does this have any relevance to us? It sounds like what he's looking to do is to connect people who are serving prison sentences, get them reconnected with the community. And I wasn't sure in this particular community whether that actually has relevance, that we should be taking. It's nice that he's doing that. I just don't know how big a deal it is for us to think about any of this as an issue. I'm thinking
No,
it's not.
I think, no.
Okay, so good guy, cordial letter, maybe we get a tour, but probably don't.
Bill and I know him.
Okay, okay. So that's all I had.
This Thursday, 7:30 p.m. In room 125 of Medfield High School, Affordable Housing Trust Board will be meeting on the Mayrock American Legion project. Probably the last meeting for the Affordable Housing Trust. We'll be looking for a date to come here after that. We'll see what happens on Thursday, but I think this is the third or the fourth meeting we've had with them, so this is probably the last one. From a going forward schedule point of view, I think we probably ought to be looking at March 26th, the last Tuesday in March, for a third March meeting, if that would work for the two of you, especially if March 5th is going to be taken up with police chief interviews. We might need that March 26th meeting. That might be a potential date for the Legion project as well, depending on how much more work they have to do coming out of Thursday's meeting and all that. But I suspect the interviews on the 5th will take up most of that meeting, and so since we're not meeting on February 26th, we might use that extra meeting.
So in March, it's the 5th, the 19th, and the 26th.
I'm thinking that. I mean, does that work for you, Pete?
I think it
Would
does,
work for you guys? I think that it's always good if we get everything else done and we don't need to do it, we can take it off. But I think, Christine, would that work for you, Evelyn? Bill, Colleen, is that good, March 26th?
I'll have to check. I'll get back to you.
Rachel? Is it good? 5th, 19th, and 26th. 26th, yeah.
So unless there's anything else, I will entertain a motion to close the 2019 annual town meeting warrant.
Is there anything new that came up in it? The Development Committee article, just so you know, I had forwarded asked for a placeholder article for the Development Committee funding. Is there anything else that we haven't seen?
So there are a couple of placeholder articles.
What's the Taylor land proposal?
Mike Taylor is working with Mark Sorrell on the possible piece of land to be donated to the town. So they were talking about that earlier today, but I don't have the full details on that. Nope, everything else should be in there. We put this together. Mike had already started to put it together, so we put it together with his notes. So please review it to make sure everything that you had asked him to be on there is on there. But in my review with Mark, we had included everything.
Okay.
So do we have a motion?
I move that we close the warrant article.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
We need the free cash article.
Thank you.
Free cash article? No?
Are we using free cash to balance the budget?
I don't know, but we usually have one on there.
Mark and I talked about that. I had removed it because in our financial policy, we were not going to use any free cash to balance the budget. We can put it in there.
We'd use it if we kept the free cash balance at $1.75 million. So
We can put it back in.
I would.
That's the only, you think there's no way it's going to be $1.75 million at all?
Yeah, I assumed that was in there when do we have to reopen the warrant?
You haven't officially voted yet, did you second? And
we haven't voted.
I don't
voted
think you
yet.
officially voted,
So
so
I agree
we will include that in there.
Just in case, I mean, maybe we'll do the number 0, but,
Sure.
or it can be $50,000, or, you know. But just for housekeeping's sake.
Okay.
Now do we have a motion to close the warrant? We can always reopen it again.
All right, well, I moved and it's moved and seconded, right?
Right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. The warrant is closed. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Next meeting is February 19th, 2 weeks from tonight.
You're watching Medfield TV, community shows.